I lived in the Blackwood household under 38 stepmothers with huge watermelons, and the family treated me like trash. Their rule was simple: if I ever outscored the favored older son, one of those women could have me killed. So I spent 18 years pretending to be useless, until the night I awakened an overpowered cultivation system. I spent my last 300 spirit stones, pressed activate, and the system took control of my body. Its first act was to kick down a feared senior's door and steal 10 bone-tempering pills. That was the Auto-Cultivation System. One-click hosting trained for me by controlling my body. If a technique lacked a resource, it took the nearest supply and called it a free gift. For 18 years, I scored 1 point on every household test. 1 point kept me alive. I lived in a leaking shack and saved every spirit stone I could touch. That night, all 300 stones dissolved. A gray menu appeared. Auto-Cultivation System activated. Recorded techniques. 1. The only option was the iron frame art, a painful body-hardening technique. At body tempering layer 2, I still looked harmless. I selected it. Begin one-click hosting? I pressed yes. Spiritual energy flooded my limbs, my back straightened, my breathing changed. Then the system found a problem. Required resource missing. 10 bone-tempering pills. Nearest qualifying resource located. Free gift available. My body stood up and ran across the estate. The pills belonged to Roderick Westfall, a feared inner branch master from the Blackveil Order. My controlled legs reached his residence and kicked the front door off its frame. A servant dropped a lantern outside. My body crossed the broken wood, shattered 3 seals on a cabinet, and opened it. 10 dark red pills waited inside a jade bottle. Free gift acquired. The pills were medicine that hardened bones during iron frame cultivation. They were also very much Roderick's property. Normal cultivators used them carefully over months. My system had swallowed a whole bottle before the owner even knew I was inside. The system swallowed all 10, sat me on his floor, and resumed training while I planned my funeral. Energy drove through my bones. Cracks spread across the floorboards. Pain climbed from my heels to my skull and erased every useful thought. Outside, servants rushed to the ruined doorway and stopped. Nobody crossed the broken seals. Nobody even tried to help. Roderick's wards had scared them for years, and some unknown idiot had just broken all 3. I was the idiot, sitting in plain sight while my body cultivated. One servant whispered that Roderick would kill the thief. Another told him to stop describing my immediate future. Deeply reassuring news. Each cycle forced more medicine through my body. The pain sharpened, then strength replaced it. My cultivation broke through body tempering layer 3. The room snapped back into focus. My arms felt heavier and stronger. A faint iron sheen crossed my skin, then faded. Layer 3 was still low, but I had gained in minutes what the household expected to take years. 18 years of hiding had preserved 1 chance. The system had turned it into a full layer. At last. For about 3 seconds, I loved it. Then hosting ended, and I regained control inside the home of the man I had robbed. A rating prompt appeared. Please rate this cultivation session. 5 stars are appreciated. I raised 1 finger. It was the wrong finger for 5 stars. 1 star, I whispered. Also, where is the uninstall button? The painted screen behind me rustled. A pale woman stepped out of the artwork. Black mist curled around her sleeves, and her smile made the stolen pills feel cheap. The Soul Eater portrait was Roderick's cursed painting. Its spirit reached for my face, and strength began draining through my skin. I threw myself backward, rolled under her arm, and sprinted through the broken doorway. The spirit followed to the courtyard wall. Her fingers brushed my shoulder and left a cold mark beneath my clothes. My thoughts slowed immediately. I nearly missed the wall with my first jump. One hand caught the top, and I hauled myself over before her nails reached my ankle. I drove my new strength into my legs and cleared the wall. First upgrade, first burglary, first haunting. Efficient evening. I landed in wet grass and almost celebrated. A clan servant caught me before I took 10 steps. Kieran Blackwood, the servant barked. Roderick Westfall has summoned everyone to the main hall. Of course he had. Minutes later, I entered the household hall with mud on my feet and Roderick's pills burning in my stomach. Roderick stood above the Blackwood clan head in a spotless black robe. Nobody sat while he remained standing. Even the elders kept their eyes down. He looked ready to punish the whole room until somebody confessed. He did not mention the broken door yet. Instead, Roderick announced that a wounded Blackveil fugitive named Garrick Fenmore had fled into the mountain. Garrick carried the 6 Desires Codex, a forbidden cultivation manual valuable enough to send the whole household searching. Roderick placed a fresh bottle on the table. Find 1 reliable trace, he told the hall, and I will reward you with 50 bone-tempering pills. 30. The room filled with hungry breathing. I looked at the bottle and wished the system had waited 10 minutes. Criminal customer service didn't honor price matching. Roderick's gaze moved across us. It paused on me for half a breath. I lowered my head and became furniture again. His eyes passed on. Roderick kept glancing toward the guest courtyard, where somebody far above him had taken residence. Each glance tightened his jaw. Our terrifying senior looked like another person's employee. That helped. A man under pressure misses details. I stayed forgettable, answered only when ordered, and waited until the search lines spread too far apart for anyone to count heads. The search moved everyone away from the estate. Once we spread out, I could keep walking and never return. By sunset, the search party had covered the mountain paths. I slipped behind a line of dead trees and headed for the far side. I made it less than a mile. The cold mark from the Soul Eater portrait tightened across my back. My knees weakened. Every thought came late, as if the spirit had packed mud into my skull. I tried to keep walking, but the path tilted under me and the trees doubled. I stumbled against a rock. The pale woman's voice reached me from far behind. Come back! During hosting, the system had protected my mind. Without it, the portrait was draining me alive, so I made another terrible decision with excellent logic. I started the iron frame art again. Hosting took my body. The spirit's voice vanished. Relief lasted until the next prompt. Required resource missing. 3 vitality pills. Nearest qualifying resource located. Free gift available. Vitality pills restored blood and stamina. I didn't own any. No, I told the system. We've discussed your gifts. My body turned deeper into the mountain. The next free gift carried me through a crack behind thorn bushes and down a narrow tunnel. Green fire lit an underground chamber. A wounded man sat at the center. Garrick Fenmore was the fugitive everyone wanted. Poison stains climbed his neck. One leg was wrapped so tightly the cloth had turned black. He still carried enough pressure to shake dust from the cave walls. 3 pills rested in his palm. My system-controlled hand took them. Garrick stared at his empty palm. I swallowed his medicine, sat down in front of him, and began cultivating. Look, I need you to understand the disrespect involved. The man had an entire household hunting him. I entered his secret cave, stole medicine from his hand, and meditated on his floor. Garrick folded his fingers slowly. Whose dog are you? He asked. I tried to answer. Hosting gave him silence. Garrick crossed the chamber and drove 5 poisoned fingers into my arm. The blow ended, hosting, and launched me into the wall. Stone cracked behind my shoulder. 5 bloody holes opened along my forearm, and poison rushed toward my chest. My fingers lost feeling first. Then, my elbow locked. Garrick had merely disabled the arm with 1 strike. His attack worked. I could barely breathe. Then Garrick stopped. He checked the broken wall and my arm. Most Layer 2 cultivators would have lost the limb. My iron frame body had kept the bones intact. What body art are you using? Garrick demanded. That pause saved me. I pressed my good hand over the wounds and grinned like I had planned the poisoning. Roderick's pills helped. Garrick's eyes narrowed. I gave him the shameless version. I told him I had broken into Roderick's residence, stolen 10 bone-tempering pills, and escaped the spirit inside the Soul Eater portrait. His suspicion shifted into disgusted amusement. You robbed Roderick and lived? Garrick asked. Living is currently under review. Garrick glanced at the cold mark above my collar. That spirit will drain you dry, he warned. You won't last long outside controlled cultivation. Then he moved between me and the tunnel. If you refuse my terms, I leave you here for the spirit, Garrick said. 1 poisoned finger pressed against the wound he had made. If you run, I stop your heart first. Good. He had blocked the exit, poisoned me, and turned the cure into a leash. Now I knew exactly how friendly this deal was. Garrick needed a path through the Blackwood search lines. I needed his curse knowledge and enough time for the poison to slow. He kept the tunnel behind him and the poisoned hand raised, so every second of conversation also kept me alive. He offered 1 choice. Guide me off this mountain, Garrick said, and I will give you a technique capable of suppressing that mark. I asked to see proof. Garrick pulled a dark codex from beneath his robe. 6 interlocking symbols moved across the cover. He held it just far enough away that I could see the pages without touching them. The moment he opened it, the system chimed inside my head. Unrecorded technique detected. Record now? I accepted without moving my face. The system copied the pages while Garrick explained that the 6 Desires Codex came from the Blackveil Order. I nodded, praised his courage, and called his theft legendary. Garrick enjoyed that last part far too much. You have some nerve, boy, he said. You stole a forbidden codex while poisoned, I replied. I'm trying to respect the senior level of bad judgment. His mouth twitched. The recording bar moved forward. Garrick closed the codex halfway. I immediately asked about the final symbol. His vanity opened the book again. Beautiful. Never underestimate a proud man holding the thing he stole. Technique recorded. The system saved it under a new label. Name was Zard. I didn't need Garrick's deal anymore. I still needed to survive leaving the cave, so I looked past his shoulder and widened my eyes. Roderick! Garrick spun around. His confidence disappeared before his body finished turning. I ran! He caught the trick before I reached the tunnel. Poisoned energy struck the wall beside my head. Garrick grabbed the back of my robe, yanked me off my feet, and drove me down near the exit. The open tunnel sat less than 10 steps away. He made sure I could see it. "You little rat." He raised his hand for another poison strike. I had one useful fact. His first attack had been strong. His breathing afterward had turned rough. The wound in his leg had reopened. Every burst cost him. I caught his wrist with both hands and twisted. The iron frame art held. Garrick lost his balance. I rolled, threw him over my shoulder, and slammed him onto the stone. His poisoned hand struck the floor. He tried to sweep my legs with the good one. I hopped the kick and drove my knee into his chest before he recovered. The poison in my arm made the room pulse, but I kept pressure on him. He clawed for the codex. I reached it first. Garrick lunged anyway. His poisoned fingers grazed my ribs and left 5 burning lines across my side. My knees dipped. He smiled because he thought strength had restored his control. Terrible timing. I slammed the codex into his wrist, seized his wounded leg, and pulled. Garrick hit the floor and lost the smile. He tried to rise on the bad leg. I drove him backward into the cave wall before he could form another strike. The impact ended the fight. For once, that part had been my idea. I checked his pulse twice, then took the 6 Desires Codex, the remaining pills, and every useful pouch he carried. One pouch released faint jade-green dust. I tied it shut and kept it away from my face. Garrick had tried to turn me into his guide. Instead, his medicine, manual, and emergency poison changed owners. The underdog kill paid well. Then, Garrick's dying curse hit. Cold poison climbed from my wounded arm toward my heart. The portrait mark tightened at the same time. My legs folded before I reached the road. I had won a forbidden codex and lost the ability to stand. New personal record. The Blackwood estate was the last place I wanted to return. It was also the only place with cultivators strong enough to remove both curses. So I hid the codex beneath a broken stone marker and dragged myself back. I covered the cache twice, memorized the cracked tree beside it, and wiped my blood from the nearest rocks. The location stayed inside my own head. That book was my only leverage, and I needed the next person to believe killing me would lose it. At the gate, a servant told me Roderick was away. Someone stronger had taken his place inside. Seraphine Ashcroft, the future saintess of the Blackveil Order, was waiting in the estate. My first real victory had delivered me straight to a much larger predator. Back at the Blackwood estate, I reached the audience chamber before my legs quit. Seraphine Ashcroft was waiting inside. She was a future saintess of the Blackveil Order. Roderick answered to her, and everybody else tried to avoid her attention. A dark veil covered half her face. Silver bells hung at her wrist without making a sound. I managed 3 steps. Her aura pushed me flat against the floor. "Kieran Blackwood," Seraphine said. "Where is Garrick Fenmore?" "Ned." The pressure increased until my ribs hurt. Seraphine's voice stayed calm. "And the 6 Desires Codex? Hidden." That word bought me another breath. I had returned with poison in my heart, a ghost mark on my back, and enough nerve to bargain face down. In my defense, standing had become unavailable. Seraphine stepped closer. "Give me the location. Cure the poison first." Her aura pressed my cheek harder into the floor. I added, "Then remove the Soul Eater mark. After that, I tell you where the codex is." Seraphine lifted one finger. The pressure rolled me onto my back without touching me. "You entered the mountain at body tempering layer 2, she said. "Garrick was stronger than you even while wounded. Explain his death." He thought I was harmless. That's not an explanation. It was enough for him. Her eyes stayed on mine. I kept the system buried. Garrick attacked, his wounds slowed him, and I used the opening. Those were the parts she could verify. The truth sounded shameless because it was. Seraphine's aura tightened again. "You expect me to reward that? Expect you to want the codex more than you want me dead." A weaker person would have called that bravery. I was dying and had one secret. I could bargain or attend a very short funeral. Seraphine crouched and placed a pale pill beside my mouth. "This handles Garrick's poison," she told me. "The other curse waits until I have the codex." I swallowed. Cold medicine spread through my veins and forced Garrick's poison away from my heart. The burning in my arm eased. My breathing steadied again. The pill had worked exactly as promised, so I gave her the location of the broken stone marker. Seraphine stood. The doors opened without her touching them. "If the codex is missing," she said, "you will wish the poison finished you." Then she left. Seraphine left me alive because the hidden codex still mattered. The servants who had dragged me inside stopped touching me. One hurried over with a chair, then waited for permission before setting it down. Poison and pride kept me on the floor. The servants kept their hands off. Apparently I had become expensive. Seraphine still held every advantage, by a lot. While Seraphine searched the mountain, a servant dragged me to a side room beside her private court. The poison had retreated, but the Soul Eater mark woke again. Cold fingers crawled across my spine. The painted spirit whispered from somewhere beyond the walls. "Come back!" The dark mark widened across my shoulder. My fingers went numb. I circulated the iron frame art on my own, but the curse slipped through every gap in my concentration. A second whisper came from the door. Then a third came from the ceiling. The Soul Eater portrait was nowhere near me, yet its spirit had found the mark and started pulling from a distance. My thoughts began sinking. I knew one reliable defense. During one-click hosting, the system controlled my mind and body too completely for the portrait to seize either. So, I opened the Auto-Cultivation System and selected the technique copied from Garrick's codex. Nameless art. The reason for the new name remained hidden. I only knew the copy came from the forbidden book and might suppress the curse until Seraphine returned. I started hosting. Warm energy entered my chest. Then the system paused. Required condition missing. Cultivation partner. Nearest qualifying partner located. Free companion available. My soul tried to leave before my body could embarrass us both. Hosting stood me up. Choose literally anyone farther away. My legs walked toward Seraphine's private courtyard. The system had found Seraphine. Of course it had. Criminal customer service always selected the owner most capable of killing me. I fought every step inside my own skull. My hands opened the court gate. My feet crossed the stone path. Seraphine's ward screamed around me, but hosting kept moving. The inner doors burst apart. Seraphine had just returned. The Six Desires Codex lay beside her. Blood darkened one sleeve. Her breathing was uneven, and a fresh crack ran through one of the silent bells at her wrist. A serpent-shaped line of black ash curled across the floor behind her. One wall had been split from ceiling to base. The codex itself looked untouched. Seraphine looked like she had carried it through an explosion. Whatever had guarded that codex had hurt someone I had assumed untouchable. I ordered my body to turn around. Hosting kept walking. She looked up. Kieran. That single word carried enough murder to clear the courtyard. Seraphine struck before I reached her. Her palm crossed the room and hit my chest. I flew through a folding screen, but hosting planted my feet before I could fall. She attacked again. My controlled body reached for the sealed pouch at my belt instead of defending normally. Her palm crushed Garrick's sealed packet between us. Jade green powder exploded across the room. Seraphine held her breath too late, her knees dipped, and the pressure around her flickered. The powder had come from Garrick's loot. I had kept it because throwing away unknown poison felt wasteful. My system apparently agreed. Hosting stepped through her weakened aura, caught her wrist, and turned the next strike aside. My body traced a paired circulation seal across the floor, then pulled her into the Nameless Art's opening stance. I need to make this plain. Control was gone, and Seraphine never agreed to any of it. I screamed at the system to stop. It ignored me completely. Light sealed the circulation pattern around us. The technique locked our breathing together and forced spiritual energy through pathways I had never trained. I fought until the room disappeared behind white light. I will keep the rest simple. The technique kept control. The 5 holes in my arms sealed, Garrick's poison burned away, and the Soul Eater mark weakened. My cultivation climbed toward the next layer. Seraphine's damaged aura strengthened too. Cracks widened across the floor, and the silver bells at her wrists started ringing. The system displayed one final line. Paired circulation incomplete. Early termination will damage both cultivators. Stopping the session could injure us both. Hosting refused every command anyway. Then, Seraphine woke. The dark veil had fallen aside. She was beautiful enough to make bad decisions look reasonable, which was deeply unhelpful while she was trying to crush my heart. Seraphine drove her palm toward my chest. My controlled body caught her wrist. Kieran, she warned, release me. Cannot. That was true. It also sounded like the worst excuse ever spoken inside a private court. She attacked again. Hosting redirected the blow and kept the circulation moving. Her next strike shattered the bedrail beside my head. I broke my breathing rhythm. The system corrected it. Then I tried to fall, and it locked my knees. When I bit down hard enough to shock the session loose, my jaw froze. Seraphine forced one hand free and reached for the cracked bell. The system caught her wrist and pushed the last current through both of us. The Nameless Art completed anyway. Energy slammed through my final barrier. I broke into body tempering layer 4 as the light around us scattered. Control returned. I released Seraphine and threw myself backward so quickly I hit the floor. She rose from the bed platform with both palms raised to strike. A voice came from outside the private courtyard. Saintess, Roderick called. The searchers found Garrick's body. Kieran returned carrying Garrick's poison. The codex has returned, and my bone-tempering pills are missing. I closed my eyes. Wonderful. The unwilling sponsor had found his first invoice. Roderick continued, louder now. The Soul Eater portrait named Kieran Blackwood. It showed me the broken cabinet. It saw him take all 10 pills. Roderick sounded more confident with every detail. Inside the room, Seraphine's bells were already ringing. He kept volunteering more fuel. A silver bell rang once. The courtyard ward crashed down. Roderick coughed outside. His knees struck the stone path hard enough for me to hear them through the door. Seraphine didn't raise her voice. Roderick tried to answer. The ward pressed him down again. Yes, Saintess. His footsteps retreated. The man who could terrify the entire Blackwood household had just been folded by one syllable. I respected the efficiency. Seraphine turned toward me. I raised both hands. I can explain the system. Stopped before the forbidden word escaped. Her eyes sharpened. The technique, I corrected. The technique took control. Garrick's powder weakened you. I couldn't stop my body. Seraphine studied me for several long breaths. Then she stepped behind a folding screen to wash the blood and powder from her skin. Water moved. I hurriedly straightened my torn robe and kept my eyes on the opposite wall. This was a strong survival choice. The wall had never threatened to refine my soul. When Seraphine returned, her outer robe had changed. Her expression had not. The system requested a rating. Please rate this cultivation session. 5 stars are appreciated. I stared at the prompt. 1 star, I muttered. You nearly got us both killed. Low rating received. Compensation processing. My blood turned cold. Cancel compensation. My hand moved toward Seraphine's torn outer robe lying on a chair. No compensation! The system pulled a small vial from an inner pocket and placed a restorative nourishing essence pill in my palm. Compensation delivered. Seraphine came around the screen and found me holding her robe in one hand and her pill in the other. Her stare moved from the cloth to my face. I offered the pill immediately. Your property keeps entering my hands. That was honest. It didn't help. Seraphine struck. I twisted aside. Her palm stopped beside my shoulder, close enough to tear the air. Black mist ripped from the cold mark on my back and screamed as it burned away. The Soul Eater curse vanished. I stood there with the stolen pill, her robe, and a clean back. Seraphine had removed the mark while missing my heart by less than an inch. The black mist tried to crawl back toward me. She closed her fist, and the spirit shrieked once before disappearing. The portrait's voice vanished from my head for the first time since Roderick's room. I couldn't tell whether that counted as mercy. My body voted yes. Seraphine freed her robe and deliberately left the pill in my hand. Does your special talent steal every object within reach? She asked. It seems drawn to dangerous women. One silver bell chimed. That answer made your situation worse. I noticed. Get out of my court. I moved before she reconsidered. Roderick was waiting beyond the gate with Brogan Blackwood, one of my relatives who had already joined the Blackveil Order. Brogan looked at my torn clothes, then at Seraphine's private court, and wisely swallowed every question. Roderick showed less restraint. He seized my collar. You robbed my residence, stole my pills, and carried my curse into the Saintess's court. I glanced at the blood on his mouth from kneeling. You seem informed. Roderick's grip tightened. Seraphine stepped through the gate behind us. Roderick released me and bowed at once. Saintess, he said, this thief deserves punishment. Seraphine slapped him across the courtyard. The entire courtyard heard the impact. Roderick hit a pillar, caught himself, and lowered his head again. Brogan stepped 2 full paces away from him, which was the fastest political decision anyone in my family had ever made. Even Roderick's own followers stared at the pillar instead of him. Excellent politics. Several Blackwood elders watched from the courtyard entrance. None of them looked at me like furniture anymore. They looked at the torn robe, the clean curse mark, and the future saintess standing between me and Roderick. One elder opened his mouth to question me. Seraphine glanced his way, and he bowed instead. My answers remained unavailable. Seraphine raised one hand. A jade boat, the size of her palm, floated above it. The boat expanded. Its hull stretched across the estate. Black sails unfolded above 3 decks. Ghostly lanterns lit along the rail while every Blackwood servant backed away. Return to the Blackveil Order, Seraphine ordered. Roderick bowed. Brogan hurried toward the boarding steps. I stayed where I was. Seraphine looked at me. She didn't repeat the order. She didn't need to. I boarded the skyship because refusing would have required a level of confidence I planned to develop later. Roderick climbed aboard without looking at me. Brogan stayed close enough to watch and far enough to deny knowing me if the mood changed. A practical relative, that one unfortunately. The deck lifted beneath my feet. The Blackwood household dropped below us. So did the shack, the 38 stepmothers, and the life I had spent pretending to be harmless. I had escaped the household. Seraphine had taken away my choice of destination. Her skyship turned toward the Blackveil Order, and 2 ghostly women were already waiting to study me. The first morning aboard Seraphine's skyship, I learned that surviving her court had made me interesting. The ship moved above the clouds without wind touching its black sails. Ghost lanterns floated along the rail. Every cabin door carried a ward strong enough to stop me from leaving through it. I had traded a leaking shack for a flying prison with better furniture. Status upgrade, technically. That was worse than being invisible. Seraphine had posted 2 maids near the forward rail to watch me. Lucille Blackmere was the smiling ghost, all soft laughter and sharp eyes. Vespera Nightwell stood beside her, colder and quiet enough to make Lucille feel safer. Lucille watched the clean skin where the Soul Eater mark had been. Our master removed that curse herself, Lucille murmured. Vespera looked at Roderick across the deck. He noticed. Roderick absolutely noticed. The man I had robbed stopped walking toward me like an executioner. He slowed, checked Seraphine's closed cabin, and approached with both hands visible. Kieran Blackwood, Roderick called. I kept both hands visible, my unwilling sponsor. His eye twitched. He had earned the label. Roderick grabbed my shoulder and lowered his voice. The Soul Eater portrait showed me everything. You broke my seals. You stole all 10 pills. Then your painting gives detailed reports. You also killed Garrick. You returned carrying his poison, and his body turned up without the codex. He attacked first. Roderick's fingers tightened. Seraphine gave me 3 days to recover that codex. She threatened to turn my soul into an artifact if I failed. While I was searching, you robbed me, found Garrick, killed him, and delivered the book yourself. Roderick had just confirmed why he looked terrified in the household hall. I gave him the safest answer. Busy week. Roderick lifted his fist. Brogan Blackwood hurried between us. My outer order relative remembered the household tests and my public layer 2 result. He looked at my aura, blinked, and accidentally became useful. Master Roderick, Brogan blurted. Kieran was only at layer 2 days ago. Roderick's fist stopped. Brogan pointed at me. He's at layer 4 now. The deck went quiet around us. Roderick released my shoulder and checked my cultivation with his spiritual sense. A wave of pressure moved through my bones. I kept my breathing even while the iron frame art resisted his probe. Brogan watched Roderick's face and finally realized he had said something important. Lucille watched mine. Vespera watched everybody. Roderick lowered his fist. He looked at the clean curse mark, then at Seraphine's cabin, then back at me. Instead of hitting me, he drew the weapon at his waist. The grudge saber was famous throughout the Blackveil Order. Its dark blade carried enough hostile energy to make the air taste metallic. Small faces seemed to move beneath the steel whenever the light changed. Even the ship's ghosts kept their distance. Roderick lifted the saber where every deck attendant could see it, then held the hilt between 2 fingers. I will limit myself to body-tempering layer 4 strength, he announced. Pull the saber free, and it is yours. He said it loudly enough for the whole deck. If I lost, he could call it proof. If I won, he could call it generosity. Every attendant turned to watch. Brogan stepped forward immediately. Bad choice. I'll try. Roderick's smile improved. Brogan had just made the test look fair. Brogan grabbed the hilt with both hands and pulled until his face turned red. The saber stayed still. Then the blade released one pulse of malevolent energy. Brogan flew backward, rolled across the deck, and stopped against a mast. He raised his head only after Lucille stopped laughing. He tried to stand, failed once, and raised a thumb from the floor. Strong blade! Sharp analysis, I told him. Lucille laughed behind one hand. Roderick turned the hilt toward me. Your turn! No! His eyebrows rose. I stole pills, I explained. I didn't lose the ability to recognize a rigged test. Roderick's smile thinned. Refusing proves you are a coward. Living proves I choose my risks. A cold hand settled on Roderick's other shoulder. Vespera had crossed the deck without making a sound. Our master wants his value measured, Vespera told him. Use the strength you declared. Lucille leaned around Roderick and smiled at me. And Kieran should try. We need a lamp cover for the lower cabin. Failure would be useful. I looked from the smiling ghost to the colder one. Your recruitment material needs work. Lucille's smile widened. Grab the saber. Refusal had become the more dangerous option. I wrapped both hands around the hilt. Roderick pinched the blade between 2 fingers and nodded. Try not to disappoint the Saintess, he murmured. I leaned closer. Try not to lose your weapon. His jaw tightened. Good. Now the test was personal for both of us. I pulled. The grudge saber didn't move. Malevolent energy surged into my palms. My iron frame body absorbed the first impact, but the deck boards groaned beneath my feet. Roderick had increased his strength. His sleeve tightened around the forearm. The wood under his boots cracked. He looked calm, which was adorable considering both maids were watching him cheat. I planted one foot against the deck and pulled harder. The blade shifted half an inch. Roderick's smile vanished. His fingers clamped down again. Dark energy spread from his knuckles into the blade. The pressure pushed my boots backward through the deck varnish. He still smiled for the audience while his grip forced me toward the deck. Vespera glanced at the cracked boards. Roderick, one word! Same family technique as Seraphine. Lucille tapped his wrist. Layer 4! Roderick ignored her for one breath. Vespera's shadow spread across his boots. If he fails because you cheated, Vespera added, the lower cabin may receive a larger lamp. Roderick's fingers loosened immediately. Roderick looked toward Seraphine's cabin. Then he reduced his pressure. The change lasted 1 heartbeat. I used it! My shoulders drove backward. The iron frame art tightened every bone in my arms. The grudge saber tore free from Roderick's fingers and came into my hands with a scream of dark energy. Brogan sat up against the mast. Lucille stopped laughing. Vespera looked at Roderick until he lowered his eyes. Roderick stared at the empty space between his fingers. Then he forced a smile. "Good," he announced. "I intended to reward you." Naturally, he called it a reward only after I took it. I rested the grudge saber across my shoulder. "Thank you, sponsor." His eye twitched again. The blade was mine. One deck attendant lowered his eyes to hide a smile. Another moved out of my path. Roderick pulled his sleeve over the fingers I had beaten and ordered everyone back to work. Lucille covered a laugh. Vespera didn't bother hiding hers. The blade was mine, and every greedy disciple who recognized it now had a reason to test me. After the test, Lucille led me below deck because Seraphine had ordered the maids to keep watching me. The corridor was narrow, windowless, and full of whispers that came from behind the walls. A thin melody drifted through the wood. It pulled at my memories, searching for fear, desire, and anything else it could use. Iron frame pressure locked my thoughts in place. I kept walking. Lucille glanced back when I didn't slow. A black hand reached through the floorboards toward my ankle. Lucille flicked one finger. The hostile presence flattened into smoke and vanished beneath her shoe. She kept walking without even checking whether the thing was dead. I tightened my grip on the grudge saber. "Does every hallway try to eat passengers?" "Only the interesting ones," Lucille replied. That answer made me feel worse. She stopped at an empty cabin and closed the door behind us. Lucille stepped close enough to inspect my collar. Her smile stayed playful. The pressure in the room did not. She moved around me once, examining the grudge saber, the clean curse mark, and the torn sleeve from Seraphine's private court. Then she leaned near my neck and inhaled. "You smell like our master," she said. "That sounds like a complaint you should take to her." Lucille hooked one finger under my chin. "You also walked through the melody in this corridor without losing your mind." I was distracted by the hands coming through the floor. "The melody makes most Layer 4 cultivators kneel." I gave her my prepared lie. "Special constitution." Lucille's eyes narrowed with interest. She leaned closer. "A special constitution that survives our master, resists soul pressure, and gains 2 layers in days? In my defense, it has been a stressful week." She laughed beside my ear. "Stress doesn't smell like Seraphine Ashcroft." I kept my face still and said nothing about the system. Lucille pressed me back against the cabin wall with one finger. "You're either very valuable or very unlucky. Those options have been working together. If I open you up, will I find the answer? I'd prefer a less invasive interview." Lucille laughed, but her finger never moved. Then her tone changed. "Our master told us the Codex carried Octavian Velmont's remnant soul. He attacked when she retrieved it. She bound him, survived his self-destruction, and returned wounded. That explained the blood, the ash, and the broken wall inside Seraphine's private court." Lucille tapped my chest. "Then you entered her court, survived, and woke stronger. Tell me why." "Already told you. Special constitution." "Good." Her smile became delighted. "We can test that." I reached for the grudge saber. Lucille touched one finger to my forehead. The room went black. When I woke again, half a month had vanished. I was lying inside another cabin as the skyship descended toward Blackveil territory. My cultivation had grown stronger. Every muscle felt drained, and my memory still ended with Lucille smiling at me. The calendar strip beside the bed had been changed twice. A bowl of medicine sat empty. My grudge saber rested within reach, which meant whoever handled me wanted me armed afterward. I stood, took one step, and sat back down. Half a month of missing time had left my legs stronger and my lower back in pain. That combination answered nothing useful. Seraphine stood at the foot of the bed. She threw a manual at my head. I caught it before it hit my face. "Blood-right blade art." The manual described a blade technique fueled by cultivator blood. Wonderful material for a man trying to avoid murder charges. "Master it within 10 days, Seraphine ordered. "Fail, and you die." The auto-cultivation system chimed immediately. "Unrecorded technique detected. Record now." I accepted. Seraphine turned away. "Wait," I called. "Did I lose half a month on this ship?" She left without answering. My future saintess had excellent command presence and terrible customer support. By the time the skyship reached the Blackveil Order, I owned a famous saber, a blood-hungry technique, and a 10-day death deadline. Blackstone towers rose from mountain cliffs below us. Disciples crossed the gaps on clouds, paper boats, and flying beasts. Nobody even looked up when the haunted warship landed. Apparently this was commuter traffic. Brogan marched me straight to the soul lamp hall before I could run. The drunken keeper saw Seraphine's seal, stopped pretending to sleep, and held out one hand. He cut my finger and fed one drop of essence blood into a black lamp. My name burned across its base in red light. Official Blackveil membership card. Designed by a psychopath. The keeper shoved a thick rulebook at me and returned to his bottle. Outside, I asked Brogan whether those rules protected me. He laughed. "Break an arm, pay a fine. Cripple someone, pay more. Steal, pay. Kill, pay the largest fine. What if the killer can afford it? The order collects, and the victim," Brogan shrugged, "usually still dead. So murder's forbidden?" Brogan shook his head. Murder's expensive. Crime with a price tag. Perfect. I had no money. The blood-fed art came with a 10-day deadline. Worse, I carried Roderick's famous grudge saber where every predator in the order could recognize it. I thought the order's pay-for-murder rule was the worst thing about my new home. Then I met the 3 men sharing it. The morning after registration, Brogan guided me toward the residence where 3 roommates were waiting. I had the grudge saber, 10 days to master bloodright, and 1 lesson from the Blackveil rulebook. Murder was legal if the killer could afford the bill. Then a giant green bird clipped our boat with 1 wing. The paper folded under us. Brogan screamed about the steering seal while we crashed into a mountainside hard enough to bury my shoulder in dirt. The bird landed above the crater. 3 riders looked down. 1 laughed and asked whether a child had made Brogan's boat. Brogan pushed a rock off his chest, ignored the blood at his temple, and crawled toward the torn boat. He checked the broken steering seal before checking whether his legs still worked. I pushed myself upright. Brogan hugged the folded paper like it had died, protecting him. My ribs are fine, I told him. Thank you for asking. Brogan cradled the wreckage tighter. The boat cost 6 stones. The simp had priorities. They got worse. 1 rider stepped down from the bird and slapped dust from her sleeve. Marlo Gravesend was the disciple Brogan worshipped. She made him forget the crash. He ran to her before checking his ribs. Brogan rushed over. Marlo, were you hurt? She slapped him. Marlo snapped. You blocked my landing path. Brogan bowed before the red mark settled on his cheek. My mistake. She struck him again for answering too slowly. Her friends watched with the relaxed faces of people who had seen this show before. Brogan kept smiling. That part hurt me more than the crash. Marlo lifted her hand a 3rd time. I caught her wrist before the slap landed. Her skin was warm. Her stare was colder than the mountain wind. She tried to pull free, found my grip stronger than expected, and finally looked at me properly. Marlo's friends stepped off the bird. Brogan stepped between us with both palms raised, protecting the woman who had been using him as practice. Marlo looked at my hand, then at the grudge saber. Who are you? I kept hold of her wrist. Kieran Blackwood. The man your bird almost planted inside that mountain. Her friends stopped smiling. Brogan did the opposite. He peeled my fingers from her wrist like I had grabbed a live furnace. Brogan hissed. Apologize. Marlo's a respected senior disciple. I looked at the 2 red marks on his cheek. She hit you twice. Brogan lowered his voice. She noticed me twice. Whoa. He was down catastrophically. Look, attraction can ruin judgment. Brogan had turned it into a career. Marlo gave me 1 slow look. Her eyes paused on Roderick's saber, then returned to my face. The contempt eased into calculation for half a second. The weapon had introduced me better than Brogan ever would. Marlo told Brogan, you should teach your relatives some manners. I released her wrist. Start with the bird, one of her friends laughed before Marlo glanced back. The laugh died immediately, and that told me exactly how her little court worked. Brogan apologized for my existence, gathered the remains of his boat, and followed her group downhill. I called after him. You were taking me to housing, he waved without turning. Ask the property clerk. My first guide at Blackveil abandoned me for a woman who used his face as stress relief, so I walked to the property desk alone. The clerk started explaining residence tiers, contribution points, and deposit rules. I heard the word deposit and decided to save us both time. I leaned over the desk. Can the order lend me 10 stones? His brush stopped. The 2 disciples behind me stopped pretending not to listen. The clerk looked at my muddy robe, the famous saber, and my empty hands. He did not ask how those facts belonged together. He stamped 1 address so hard the desk shook, slid it across the counter and said, 100 miles west. I turned the slip over. Is that the cheap district? The clerk capped his ink. It is the district farthest from this desk. The disciples behind me laughed. The clerk called the next person before I moved. That was the entire loan discussion. Lucille told me later what happened while I walked west. Roderick had asked Seraphine why she cared about 1 useless Blackwood. Seraphine asked whether he preferred the mines or having his soul sealed inside an artifact. Roderick backed out with his head down and stopped asking. Then Seraphine ordered Lucille to keep watching me. So while I crossed half the order looking for cheap housing, my unwilling sponsor was learning that curiosity could become forced labor. Useful lesson. By late afternoon, I reached the address expecting a shed beside a corpse pit. Instead, a private courtyard waited behind black stone walls. It had a training yard, a clean bedroom, and enough furniture to make my old shack look personally insulting. 3 other bedroom doors were sealed. Each seal carried a different trace of spiritual energy. 1 felt cold, 1 felt heavy. The last made the grudge saber hum against my hip. I ignored the 3 seals, checked the kitchen, and claimed the cleanest room. The bed did not leak when it rained. My standards were still recovering from the Blackwood household. I sat in the courtyard, reread the murder finds, and examined the grudge saber. A broken arm cost less than a life. A life could cost more stones than I had seen in 18 years. The blade's hostile energy pressed against my palm while the numbers pressed harder. Bloodright could control that energy, but the art was still only recorded. Seraphine's 10-day deadline kept shrinking. At sunset, the front gate opened. Bastian Crowhurst entered first. He carried a ghost lantern, and 3 pale faces drifted inside its glass. He smiled like we were already friends. "A new roommate?" Bastian asked. Thane Redgrave followed him through the gate. Thane was built for close combat. His knuckles were wrapped, and every step made the courtyard tiles complain. Cassian Renfield entered last. He wore a sword at his hip and a sealed talisman over one wrist. His body-tempering Layer 5 pressure made the other two look polite by comparison. They introduced themselves one at a time. Then the questions started. Bastian poured tea and asked how I had entered the Order off-cycle. His ghost lantern floated behind my chair, close enough to listen. I told him Seraphine's ship had carried several people from the Blackwood household. True, and comfortably incomplete. Thane asked why I carried Roderick Westfall's famous saber. He kept watching my hands instead of my face. I told him Roderick had offered a test and lost. Thane laughed like that answer had made me smaller. Cassian asked whether Seraphine Ashcroft had personally accepted me. That was the only question that mattered. His sword remained sheathed until I answered. I gave them the safe truth. Seraphine had never promised to protect me. Roderick had handed over the saber in front of witnesses. I was only a new outer disciple. I had no contribution points, no local allies, and one relative who had abandoned me for Marlowe. Cassian's sword hand moved away from the hilt. Bastian refilled my tea. Thane sat closer. Bastian set down his cup. "Name a price for the saber." I set my own cup aside. "It isn't for sale." Thane cracked his neck. "Everything has a price here." I tapped the hilt. "Roderick gave it to me." Cassian smiled. "Roderick loses things often. You don't need to copy him." I'd spent 18 years letting stronger people decide what I could keep. I was done handing over every reward before I enjoyed it. I rested one hand on the hilt. "Ask again after you learn manners." Ghost user Bastian opened his lantern. The 3 pale faces shot at me from different sides. One screamed into my left ear and drove cold pressure straight at my mind. The iron frame art held my body. Whatever had happened during my missing half-month kept the ghost from folding me. Bastian's smile slipped. Thane crossed the courtyard behind the ghosts and drove a fist into my ribs. I blocked high, so the punch landed low and launched me through the tea table. Cups shattered around my head. Sword user Cassian drew before the wood stopped falling. His first slash cut my shoulder. I caught the second on the grudge saber, but Thane hit my wrist from the side. The saber spun away and buried itself beside the training yard. Bastian's ghosts wrapped around my arms and pulled in opposite directions. Cassian stepped on my chest guard and aimed his sword at my throat. "Last offer. The saber for your life." I drove both heels into Thane's knee, ripped one arm loose, and rolled before Cassian's point landed. They had rehearsed this kind of robbery. My refusal to stay down broke their rhythm. Thane stepped in for the finish. I headbutted him hard enough to split his lip, tore one arm free, and caught his next fist against my iron frame bones. His eyes changed. I twisted his wrist and threw him into Bastian. The ghost user lost control of one spirit, and it bit into Thane's shoulder before he forced it away. Beautiful. Cassian's sword hit my back before I could follow. The cut burned, but the blade failed to reach bone. He expected me to collapse. I turned and slammed my forehead into his mouth instead. Bastian stopped smiling. "What body art is that?" I wiped blood from my mouth. "Expensive to test." I kicked his lantern aside, recovered the grudge saber, and drove Cassian across the courtyard with 3 heavy swings. He blocked 2. The third broke his stance and opened a line across his chest guard. Thane tried to flank me. I pointed the saber at his injured knee. He stopped. Bastian called his ghosts closer instead of sending them forward. For several breaths, none of them advanced. They had started the fight thinking I was a delivery. Now all 3 were calculating the murder fine from the other side. I raised the grudge saber. "Come again, and I kill all 3 of you." Thane looked at Cassian. Bastian's ghosts pulled back. Then I remembered the fines. 3 dead disciples could cost between 10 and 30,000 stones each. I had almost no money, and 3 men already looking scared enough to negotiate, so I turned and sprinted through the gate. Yes, I threatened mass murder and ran. Go ahead and laugh. Pride wasn't worth 3 murder fines. Half an hour later, I stopped in the forest beyond the residence. Blood soaked my shoulder. My ribs hurt every time I breathed. Waiting would give the roommates time to report my strange body and steal the saber while I slept. Seraphine had given me 10 days to master Bloodright. I opened the system on day 1. Begin one-click hosting? I accepted. The system found the nourishing essence pill still tucked inside my robe. It had stolen that pill from Seraphine, which apparently made it a legitimate emergency fund. Hosting swallowed it. Warm energy closed the sword cut and eased the damage in my ribs. For once, criminal customer service used something already in my pocket. Then the next prompt appeared. Required resource missing, essence blood from 3 body tempering cultivators. Nearest qualifying sources located. Free gift available. My body turned toward the residence. I groaned. Oh, come on. The system carried me back through the gate. Bastian was packing my room. My spare clothes, Garrick's empty pouches, and the rule book sat in one bundle near his feet. Thane held the grudge saber's empty sheath. Cassian stood near the courtyard wall with a message talisman ready. They had used my retreat to begin stealing everything else. Worse, Cassian was preparing to report the body art they had seen. Once that message left, my special constitution lie would start traveling without me. Hosting drew the grudge saber from beside the broken table and crossed the courtyard before Bastian's first ghost fully formed. One clean cut dropped him beside his lantern. Blood rose from the wound and streamed along the saber. The blood-right pattern ignited across my arms. Thane punched my spine. Bastian's blood pattern broke across the floor. The system loosened its grip, and my mind slammed back into place. The outside attack broke full control. I hit the ground, rolled, and came up facing the remaining 2. Thane stared at Bastian's body. Cassian stared at the blood flowing into my saber. Their greed had finally become fear, but the gate was behind me now. Cassian tore the seal from his wrist talisman. A white blade of light filled the courtyard. I threw myself behind the stone well. The blast split the well, burned through my side, and buried me under half the wall. My iron frame bones held. Barely. Cassian stared at the rubble. Still alive? I pushed the stones off and spat dust. Disappointed? Thane charged before I stood straight. I stepped inside his punch, cut across his thigh, and drove the saber's hilt into his jaw. He fell near Bastian and stopped moving. Cassian backed toward the gate. His talisman was gone. His sword hand shook. He still tried one last thrust. I knocked the blade aside and drove him into the broken well. The grudge saber struck once. Cassian collapsed beside Thane. The courtyard went quiet. Then both bodies moved. Thane had slowed his breathing. Cassian had hidden the second talisman beneath his sleeve. They had played dead and waited for me to turn away. The grudge saber reacted before they could rise. Blood-red lines wrapped around both men and drained the strength from their limbs. I could have pulled the blade back. I didn't. They had attacked, robbed my room, and prepared to expose the one secret keeping me alive. I let the saber finish what they started. Blood-right blade art mastered. Power settled to my hands. The hostile pressure inside the grudge saber finally obeyed me. The system requested a rating. 3 stars, I said. The healing was useful. The homicide package needs clearer pricing. A soft female laugh moved through the trees beyond the wall. When I looked, nobody was there. Someone had watched from start to finish. Nobody had helped. I had just shown far more than I wanted. The female laugh confirmed Seraphine's order had followed me all the way to the courtyard. Lucille later called my mastery speed disgusting, which was her version of impressed. I dragged the gate shut before any neighboring disciple wandered in. Then I calculated the possible fine twice. 3 deaths at the highest estimate meant 90,000 spirit stones. The strongest technique I owned had just turned me into the walking fine, so I buried the bodies beneath the training yard, cleaned the saber, and started looking for Brogan. I had kept Roderick's weapon. Now I needed money or an escape route before 3 powerful families learned what keeping it had cost. Before anyone found the bodies, I went looking for Brogan. 3 dead roommates were under my training yard. My possible fine reached 90,000 spirit stones. I needed money, an exit route, or a new identity before breakfast. Brogan's courtyard door was unlocked. I found him kneeling before Marlo Gravesend's portrait. He kissed 2 fingers, pressed them to her painted cheek, and whispered that she had looked radiant while slapping him. I backed toward the door. Brogan saw me in the portrait's glass. Neither of us moved. I saw nothing, I told him. Brogan turned from the portrait. You entered without knocking. I pointed at Marlowe's painted face. I was distracted by my future sister-in-law. His embarrassment disappeared. You think she could become my wife? The simp had folded instantly. Beautiful. I sat beside him and praised Marlowe's elegance, spiritual bird, and excellent wrist strength. Brogan relaxed enough to explain how an outer disciple could leave Blackveil territory. A rented corpse cloud could carry 1 disciple beyond the mountain boards. The travel clerk asked no questions after payment. Perfect! The price was 10 low-grade spirit stones. Nobody had followed me. Every quiet minute kept the bodies hidden, but 3 missing roommates would not stay private for long. Lend me 10, I said. Brogan looked offended. I gave my stones to Marlo. I stared at him. All of them? Brogan touched the portrait. She needed a new saddle for the bird. I pointed toward the mountain. The bird that destroyed your boat? Brogan nodded proudly. She trusted me with the expense. I had killed 3 armed cultivators and still found this more disturbing. Brogan sent me to the task hall. Paid missions could cover the cloud. He also promised to praise my respectful new attitude to Marlo. That attitude was fraud. 10 minutes later, I stood before Blackveil's idea of employment. 1 task paid half a stone to clean a corpse furnace. The previous worker's name was crossed out in red, another paid 1 stone to feed venom worms without losing a finger. A jar beside it held 3 preserved fingers. A third needed someone to sleep beside an angry spirit. The reward increased if the worker woke up sane. The only serious paying mission sat far above my lair. Its notice promised, "Survivors may keep the teeth." The clerk refused to name the owner. I stepped away from the board. Look, I needed money. I also wanted to keep my fingers. A towering senior sister offered to help me earn contribution points privately. Her warm smile and powerful arms made the invitation sound like an arrest. In my defense, I told her, I'm currently fleeing several commitments. She reached for my sleeve. I fled the hall. Outside, Marlo was passing with several disciples. She heard me ask the mission clerk whether any team accepted new Layer 4 members. Her eyes moved to the grudge saver, then to my empty purse. I know a team, Marlo said. Their leader enjoys training newcomers. That sentence arrived far too helpfully from a woman who disliked me. She led me to Hadrian Frostwick, a body-tempering Layer 6 disciple, surrounded by his own people. His team had rented a corpse cloud, packed its bags, and left one place open for a low-layer recruit. He looked at the saber first, then at the healing cut on my shoulder. Roderick's weapon, Hadrian noted. Are you part of his inner branch? I touched the hilt. Roderick is more of an unwilling sponsor, Marlo cut in. He doesn't have a branch badge. Brogan abandoned him this morning. Seraphine Ashcroft has never claimed him publicly. Hadrian asked why I needed a mission so urgently. I gave him my most harmless smile. I enjoy fresh air. Marlo glanced at my empty purse. He needs 10 stones to leave. She had understood my problem after one look. That was impressive and annoying. Hadrian's hesitation faded. He exchanged one quick glance with the woman folding formation flags. Then he smiled and offered his hand. Then you are welcome. Too fast. Look, even I knew the welcome was wrong. I shook it anyway. I needed to leave before the buried men became a public discussion. Marlo left the moment Hadrian accepted me. Hadrian introduced the team while they worked. His Layer 4 sister, Elowen Frostwick, checked my wounds and carried the medicine. Her pill belt immediately earned my attention. Niles Thornfield checked my stance and asked for a spar. The Layer 5 fighter smiled whenever someone mentioned pain. A second Layer 5 fighter stayed beside Hadrian and watched every exit. The formation specialist folded black flags into a case for trapping the target beasts. Hadrian called the mission field training for Elowen. I only needed to follow orders, stay near her, and carry the targets. Every instruction placed me exactly where the team wanted me. None asked what I could actually do. Elowen smiled at me. You look relieved. I looked across the 5 of them. I'm looking at 5 stronger people who invited me somewhere dangerous. Relief would be premature. Elowen's smile widened. Smart. I glanced at Hadrian. That also feels premature. She laughed. Hadrian watched the exchange and became even friendlier. The team left before I could reconsider. A gray corpse cloud carried us beyond Blackveil's mountains. Elowen stayed beside me whenever I approached an edge. Friendly. Very friendly. Hadrian kept a tight formation beyond the wards. The formation specialist checked the route twice. The second fighter counted us at every stop. I waited until the outer towers vanished. If someone lost their disciple token, I asked, could the order still find them? Hadrian nodded at the black token on my belt. A debtor once fled 100 stones and built a family beyond Blackveil, he said. The order found him 20 years later, killed the family, dragged him back, and billed him for the search. That killed my escape plan. Elowen watched my face. Niles stopped smiling. Even the second fighter looked away. Throwing away the token would announce that I had started running. Hadrian then explained that our mission paid 20 stones per person. I stared at him. 20? Hadrian spread one hand. For a successful hunt, I counted on my fingers. At that rate, I only need several thousand successful hunts. Elowen handed me a water flask. Learn a profession. Talismans, pills, artifacts. They pay better. I pointed back toward Blackveil. Brogan makes talismans. Elowen snorted. Brogan needed 2 years to produce one usable piece. Even if Blackveil gave me the usual 3-month payment window, that schedule was comedy. Niles heard the conversation and offered to test whether I could qualify for harder missions. He stepped to the front of the cloud and raised both fists. I accepted. Refusing would make the team question why I carried a famous saber. Drawing it would show too much. Niles attacked first. His Layer 5 speed beat mine. His first strike clipped my jaw. The second targeted the injured shoulder Cassian had cut. I absorbed it on my forearm, stepped through the third, and drove my shoulder into his chest. He slid backward across the cloud. The team stopped talking. Hadrian's eyes moved from my feet to my ribs. The formation specialist stopped folding flags. Elowen's smile became much more interested. Niles came again with more power. He feinted high, kicked low, and expected the damaged ribs to fold. I let Ironframe take the kick and trapped his arm. He almost went over the edge before the second fighter caught his robe. Niles twisted free and swung at my temple. I ducked, planted one palm against his chest, and stopped the follow-up without drawing the saber. The grudge saber hummed at my waist. I kept it sheathed, showing them Bloodride would answer too many questions. Niles landed, stared at my hands, and grinned. Layer 4? I spread my hands. Apparently! Hadrian's smile sharpened. Aloan checked the bruise on my jaw, then pressed a small pill bottle into my palm. You trust medicine from strangers? She teased. I weighed the bottle in my palm. I trust free medicine. You're still under review. Eloan leaned closer. Take one and survive long enough to finish the review. The pills were real. I kept the bottle. My body had impressed them. Their kindness increased immediately. Cassian had relaxed the same way after learning nobody protected me. I remembered how that ended. Several days later, the corpse cloud reached Cindercoil City. Alaric Harrogate met us at the gate. He was the city lord and a Foundation realm cultivator, one full realm above everyone on our team. Alaric warned us that a human-faced spider had started laying eggs near our hunting area. The creature was also in the Foundation realm. One clean hit could kill our entire body-tempering team. Our target ferret and flower demon had wandered into its territory anyway. Hadrian asked whether the city would remove it. Alaric smiled. You are welcome to wait until it leaves. How long? Hadrian asked. Alaric glanced toward the ridge. It's laying eggs. Ask the spider. Hadrian declined. He wanted the mission completed now. Eloan looked at her brother, then at me. The formation specialist gripped the case tighter but did not object. The city fox watched Hadrian accept the risk. He had warned us. Whatever happened next belonged to us. That night, the team took guest rooms near the city wall. I calculated the dead again. 20 stones would not matter. Professions took too long. Selling the grudge saber could solve part of the problem. Losing it would remove my strongest weapon and make Roderick laugh himself healthy. Then every lamp in my room went out. Cold mist filled the courtyard. Dead figures climbed the wall. One wore Bastion's face. Another carried Cassian's broken talisman. The illusion used memories I wanted buried. I cut through the first corpse. It became smoke. The second grabbed me and whispered the highest murder, fine. I broke its wrist, fed Bloodrite into the saber, and dissolved 3 more. A woman laughed behind me. Lucille Blackmere, Seraphine's smiling ghost maid, stepped from the mist and pressed one finger against the blade. You mastered Bloodrite, she murmured. I kept the edge between us. You sound disappointed? Lucille's smile widened. I watched the whole courtyard. That confirmed the laugh beyond my wall. Lucille circled me. Your sponsor looked miserable when our master ordered me to watch you, she added. I lowered the saber a fraction. He wears it well. She stepped close enough for the mist to chill my neck. 3 cultivators died, mastered a blood art before their bodies cooled. Your special constitution keeps becoming less believable. I gave her my best innocent face. In my defense, my special talent has terrible boundaries. Lucille's smile vanished. She had heard the lie before and liked it less every time. Your special talent killed Bastion before he raised a full ghost, she said. Then it drank from all 3 bodies and completed an art you had owned for less than a day. I kept my expression flat. Stressful learning environment. Weak recovery. I knew it. She knew it. Lucille pressed me against the wall and traced 1 nail over my chest guard. I could open you and check. The grudge saber rose between us. Buy me dinner first. Her smile returned. You might survive the first course. Lucille pressed harder. Cold slipped through my armor. Black chains snapped from Lucille's shadow and wrapped both wrists. They yanked her 3 steps away before she could cut deeper. A third chain pinned her waist to the courtyard pillar. Seraphine was absent, but her restraint reached the room. Lucille could test me. She could not take me apart without permission. Lucille looked toward the darkness and clicked her tongue. Protective tonight! I did not comment. Surviving attractive women had already become a full-time profession. I asked the question, ruining my sleep. How do I earn 90,000 stones? Lucille answered at once. Ask our master. I shook my head. I'm not becoming a kept man. Lucille looked me up and down. That decision may be above your current pay grade. I kept the saber raised. I already owe her enough. The chains loosened. Lucille tossed me a thin manual. Blood step art. It converted blood energy into explosive movement. The system recorded it before I finished reading the first page. Lucille tapped the cover. Master it within 7 days. Caught the manual. And if I fail? Lucille dissolved from the knees upward. I take you apart carefully. The smiling ghost vanished into mist. By morning, Hadrian's team was downstairs preparing equipment nobody had explained. Aloan smiled when she saw me. Niall stopped talking the moment I entered. I now had a 7-day deadline and a tracked token. A Foundation realm spider guarded the route, and my teammates were far too pleased with my body. The one escape art I needed had arrived exactly when their smiles stopped feeling friendly. The next morning in Cindercoil City, Elowen said the team needed a day. Hadrian left before breakfast with Duncan Greystone, the team's second Layer 5 fighter. Imogen Rookwood, their formation specialist, carried the flags. Niall stopped talking when I entered. Elowen looked happier than anyone facing a Foundation Realm spider should look. She touched my sleeve. "Rest today. Stay in your room." I nodded. "Of course." I waited until she left, counted to 50, and climbed out the rear window. The mission paid 20 stones. Resting would not fix my debt. More importantly, normal hunting gear did not require the formation case Imogen carried under her cloak. So I followed Elowen toward the market. She met Niles beside a formation stall. They bought black thread, bone pegs, and paper seals designed for a large array. Our stated mission involved catching a ferret and a flower demon. Neither target required enough material to cover a hillside. The stall owner counted the bone pegs and asked which sub-array they were completing. Niles glanced around the market. "Lower your voice." Elowen paid before the owner finished naming the formation. Her hand shook once while passing the stones, then steadied. She was nervous. She was still doing it. That answered one question and made the next one ugly. I moved closer behind a cloth vendor's rack. Elowen mentioned the tracking fragrance. Niles asked whether the bees could follow it through an illusion. She told him the mark had already been placed. I checked my sleeves. The market vendor noticed me and held up a sheet of gray fabric. "Spirit-concealing cloth, hides any aura." He draped one corner over a caged spirit mouse. The animal vanished from my senses even while it kept biting the bars. I asked whether he guaranteed it. He did. Then he named the price, 30 stones. I had almost none, so I grabbed the cloth and ran. The vendor shouted about theft. Fair point. I was busy testing it. I wrapped the cloth around my shoulders and cut through 3 alleys. My aura disappeared beneath the fabric. The market noise faded behind me. Then a golden bee landed on my nose. A second bee settled on my sleeve. 12 more formed a line above the rooftops. The cloth hid spiritual pressure. It did nothing to remove whatever Elowen had placed on me. She stepped into the alley with Niles behind her. Both were breathing evenly. They had not needed to search. The bees had taken them straight to me. Elowen folded her arms. "I thought you were resting." I lifted the stolen cloth. "I'm resting aggressively." Niles looked at the stolen cloth. "You also shop aggressively." The vendor rounded the corner and demanded payment. Niles threw him 1 stone without looking back. The bees circled my head. Caught in full definition, I asked Elowen when she had marked me. She brushed dust from my sleeve. "You worry too much." That was not an answer. Her fingers paused over the exact place where the bees kept landing. I expected them to punish me or finish buying the missing seals. Instead, Elowen linked both arms around mine and smiled like we were on a pleasant walk. "Come back," she said. "Hadrian's worried." Niles moved behind us. They abandoned the formation stall and escorted me home. Look, their priorities were screaming. The array could wait. I could not. By nightfall, they had me under watch. Duncan sat outside the guest house with his weapon across his knees. Niles paced the roof. Elowen moved into the room beside mine and checked my door twice before pretending to sleep. I pushed a cup against the wall and listened after midnight. Hadrian's voice came from Elowen's room. Imogen reported that the main formation was ready. Niles asked whether the sub-array could hold someone with a strong body. Elowen answered that the illusion attacked direction, not flesh. I heard enough to understand one rule. A main array consumed a living sacrifice trapped inside a looping illusion sub-array. The fragrance and bees kept the offering from escaping before the 2 arrays connected. They never called the sacrifice a person, they called it material. That little wording choice finished the introduction. Nobody said my name. They did not need to. Marlowe had sent me to a team missing 1 low-layer recruit. Elowen had marked me. Hadrian had ignored the spider. Now they were building a sacrifice array and guarding my bedroom. The system had taken control of my body before. I was not letting 5 smiling strangers do it on purpose. At dawn, they marched me into the ridge outside Cindercoil City. Hadrian walked ahead with Imogen. Elowen stayed attached to my arm. Duncan and Niles kept behind me. The formation specialist placed small flags along the route while pretending to search for beast tracks. A pack of low-level beasts burst from the brush. For one hopeful second, the formation broke. Imogen moved left. Duncan turned right. Elowen's grip loosened. I stepped toward the trees. Duncan crushed the first beast with 1 blow. Niles cut down 2 more. I reached the shade and found Hadrian already there. His Layer 6 pressure killed the remaining beasts before I could pass him. He smiled and pointed me back toward the group. "Stay close." The escape window had lasted 3 seconds. They had trained for outside threats and for me. Elowen tightened both hands around my arm. "Careful," looked at both of her hands. "Your concern is becoming physical." Elowen's smile stayed fixed. "You're difficult to protect." I pulled once against her grip. "Then stop trying so hard." She smiled and refused to let go. After another mile, Hadrian pointed toward a dark ravine. He told Imogen to prepare the main formation with him. They disappeared between the rocks, leaving Elowen, Duncan, and Niles around me. Hadrian and Imogen were gone. Only the 3 weaker teammates remained. I moved first. I drove my elbow into Elowen's ribs, tore free, and drew the grudge saber. Niles had seen my body strength on the corpse cloud, so he jumped back, instead of blocking. Duncan charged straight through the first slash. The saber cut his shoulder guard. He caught my wrist with both hands. I kicked his knee, broke the grip, and sent blood right through the blade. Red pressure ripped across the trail and shattered 2 formation flags. Elowen hit the ground, rolled, and shouted for Hadrian. "No more acting," I told her. "Tell me what the array eats." Her face went still. That was answer enough. Niles attacked from my blind side. I turned the saber flat and smashed him into a tree. He bounced off the trunk, coughed, and still cut off the path toward the city. Duncan tackled me before I could finish the swing. We rolled across a line of buried bone pegs. I drove the saber's pommel into his shoulder once, twice, then felt the ground answer beneath us. Golden chains erupted from the buried pegs. I cut the first chain. 2 more replaced it. Niles threw a paper seal onto my blade, and the metal grew heavy enough to drag my arm down. Elowen kicked the grudge saber's flat side away from her brother's direction. One wrapped my sword arm, another locked my ankles. The third caught my throat and dragged me toward a wall of gray light. Elowen climbed to her feet and pressed 2 fingers against the mark hidden in my sleeve. "Brother needs you alive," she said. The chains threw me through the wall. I landed in the same forest under a different sky. The path curved around one black mountain. I ran for 15 minutes and returned to the same dead tree. I changed direction. The tree waited again. Even the cut I carved into its bark reset. I climbed the nearest ridge. The horizon bent and placed the black mountain above me. I jumped into a stream, followed the current, and walked out beside the same dead tree with dry boots. The illusion rerouted every movement to the dead tree. Normal escape had failed. Hadrian only needed me lost until the main array connected. Lucille's bloodstep art required blood nourishment. Hosting tracked real resources. The fake mountain was only light, so the system had a real target. I selected bloodstep. Begin one-click hosting? I accepted. My body turned away from every visible path and walked straight toward the mountain. The rock looked solid. Hosting stepped through it. Cold darkness replaced the illusion. Behind me, the false mountain remained a thin wall of gray light. I had found the exit. The system requested a rating before it finished moving. 4 stars, I said. You finally committed a crime in the correct direction. Required blood nourishment located. My body continued into a cave. Large white eggs covered the floor. Each shell held a dark red crystal pulsing with concentrated blood energy. The human-faced spider had laid them close to the array because the ridge's dark energy fed both. Hadrian's perfect sacrifice site shared a wall with a Foundation Realm nursery. Genius planning. Hosting drew the grudge saber and cut through the nearest shells. Bloodstones broke free and dissolved into the blade pattern. One shell split and sprayed sticky webbing across the floor. Speed flooded my legs. The cave blurred around me while bloodstep completed one circulation after another. My calves burned, my heartbeat doubled. Hosting kept cutting until every needed cycle was paid. Far beyond the cave, a formation pulse struck the ridge and cut off so sharply I felt it through the stone. I took that to mean the main array had lost its sacrifice. Bloodstep art mastered. Control returned. Something screamed above me. The mother spider dropped from the ceiling. Its body filled half the cave. Pale faces moved across its abdomen, each one opening its eyes toward the broken eggs. 8 claws struck the floor around me. The spider lowered one claw beside a split shell. Then every face on its abdomen turned toward me. A web snapped toward my chest. I triggered bloodstep. My body shot across the cave before the web landed. The movement drained blood energy fast, but it carried me between 2 claws and through the exit. Stone exploded behind my heels. The spider followed. I crossed the ridge in bursts. Every step left a red afterimage. One burst carried me 50 feet, another cleared a ravine, and the next nearly emptied my lungs. Bloodstep was fast, but each use burned the same energy, keeping me alive. Webs cut trees apart behind me. One strand caught my sleeve and yanked me off balance. I sliced the fabric free before the spider reeled me back. One claw grazed my back and tore open the robe without reaching bone. The monster was stronger, faster over distance, and personally offended. I needed another target before my blood ran out. Ahead, golden tracking bees floated above the trail. Elowen, Duncan, and Niles were searching for me. The bees reached the spider's aura and froze in mid-air. Elowen's face lost all color. Duncan turned toward the city. Niles reached for his weapon. I could have changed direction. I did not. They had marked me, watched me, chained me, and delivered me to an altar. The system had created the chase. Choosing the route was mine. I activated bloodstep and passed directly between them. "Thank you for taking care of me," I called. "I brought a gift." The spider hit their formation one breath later. Duncan blocked a claw and flew through a tree. Niles dragged him upright. Their formation cracked before it fully opened. Aloan tried to follow me. She struck the mark on my sleeve, ordering the bees to turn. The insect still pointed at me, but the tracking fragrance coated her own fingers too. The spider followed the strongest nearby trace and locked onto her first. Her own tracking trick pulled the spider straight to her. A web wrapped around her waist and pulled her backward. Niles turned to help. Duncan grabbed his shoulder. "Leave her!" Niles hesitated. The spider hauled Elowen into the trees. Her scream stopped behind the first ridge. Duncan dragged Niles toward Hadrian's array. I kept running. By the time I reached Cindercoil City, Bloodstep had drained most of my strength. I collapsed inside the gate and asked for Alaric Harrogate. The city lord arrived before the guards decided whether to throw me outside. He placed one hand on my shoulder. Foundation realm energy refilled enough of my body to keep me conscious. I knelt because pride was cheaper than being eaten. Hadrian's array failed, I told Alaric. His team destroyed the spider's eggs. The mother is following them toward your city. Alaric's smile vanished. He looked toward the ridge, sensed the Foundation realm aura, and understood that the threat was real. The guards around us stopped pretending this was an outer disciple problem. His eyes sharpened at the word array. I described the black flags and failed pulse. His concern became interest. Hadrian had built something valuable. Alaric closed the gates, ordered me inside, and left to intercept the team. He wanted the artifact. The city fox returned after dark with the soul-calling banner, Imogen's torn outer coat, and Hadrian's bloodied formation spike. He placed the evidence on the city hall table. 3 fresh soul traces moved beneath the banner's black surface. 2 traces carried the same subarray marks I had escaped. Duncan's and Niles's blood stained the inner rings. 1 trapped trace kept striking the false wall. The other twisted every time Alaric said Hadrian's name. I reconstructed the sequence from what he brought. After Elowen was taken, Duncan and Niles had reached Hadrian wounded. Hadrian refused to retreat. Alaric was a formation expert. He read the inner marks aloud. Hadrian had keyed the subarray to admit Duncan and Niles while leaving himself and Imogen outside. To the wounded men, it would have looked like shelter while the other 2 drew the spider away. The moment they entered, he activated the main array. Duncan and Niles became the replacement sacrifices. Imogen's coat made the next betrayal even uglier. 1 spike hole entered through the back. The angle showed she had turned toward the approaching spider when Hadrian struck. Her blood coated his formation weapon, and the 3rd soul trace was trapped inside the banner. The evidence had already said enough. Hadrian had finished the artifact with the woman standing beside him, then fled toward the city carrying all 3 souls. Look, I need you to understand how cooked this man was. His original sacrifice escaped, so he processed his own team and called the result a victory. Alaric personally witnessed the final part. Hadrian reached the road with the spider behind him and begged the city lord to kill it. Alaric answered by tearing the soul-calling banner from his hands. Hadrian threatened Blackveil fines, branch revenge, and every punishment his status could buy. Alaric weighed the artifact while he talked. 3 fresh souls moved inside it. Then the spider arrived. Hadrian stepped behind Alaric, still expecting rescue. The city lord stepped aside and offered him as compensation for the destroyed eggs. The spider accepted. Hadrian Frostwick became the final offering in his own ritual. The discount cult leader had spent an entire mission building a sacrifice altar. He simply guessed the wrong name for the sacrifice. Alaric returned to the city with the completed banner and a rescue story already prepared. Hadrian was dead. The spider had left. Every teammate who knew the original plan was gone. Only Alaric and I remained. He smiled at me across the city hall and tucked the banner into his sleeve. I had escaped the array and fed the betrayers to their own monster. Every conspirator was gone. Beautiful. Too bad Alaric now controlled the public story, and 3 buried bodies were still waiting for me back at Blackveil. Across the city hall table, Alaric hid Hadrian's soul-calling banner inside his sleeve. Then he performed a rescue story polished enough to survive one careless question. According to him, he had reached the ridge too late. The spider had already destroyed Hadrian's team. He recovered their belongings, chased the monster away, and returned as the tragic city lord who had tried his best. I had heard Alaric describe how he took the banner and stepped aside for the spider. The 3 soul traces under his sleeve backed every ugly word. His acting still deserved 4 stars. Alaric placed 5 storage pouches on the table. Your companions left these behind. I lowered my head and performed grief. Senior Hadrian was a noble leader. The banner inside Alaric's sleeve gave a faint, angry pulse. We both ignored it. Then the city fox drew out the black artifact and rested it between us. 3 trapped souls moved beneath its surface. You survived their final formation, Alaric observed. Perhaps this should belong to you. That offer came with enough evidence to bury me beside the others. I pushed it back. Hadrian completed it. You recovered it! I would never steal a dead senior's legacy. Alaric smiled. Very respectful. Grief has improved my manners. He kept the banner. Good. One incriminating nightmare had chosen another owner. Alaric then asked the question he actually cared about. Hadrian was layer 6. You're layer 4. How did you return alone? I could not mention the system. I also could not pretend luck had outrun a Foundation Realm spider, so I used the two names that had already changed stronger men's posture. Lucille Blackmere gave me bloodstep, I told him. Seraphine Ashcroft's people have been watching my progress. I never claimed Seraphine protected me. I let Alaric decide how much danger lived between those facts. His fingers left the banner. His smile stayed. The servant by the door lowered his eyes. Alaric called for the mission clerk. He personally produced the two creatures Hadrian's team had been assigned to recover, a purple-eyed ferret and a captured flower demon. He also confirmed that I had warned the city before the spider arrived. 5 minutes earlier, I had been a suspicious survivor. Now servants were carrying mission proof to my seat. Seraphine's name remained the best currency I did not own. Alaric leaned closer. When you return to Blackveil, remember who helped you. I'll remember who kept the banner. His eyes narrowed with amusement. You learn quickly. Danger has been tutoring me full time. The next morning, Alaric placed me on an automatic corpse cloud aimed at Blackveil. I asked to remain in Cindercoil until my wounds healed. He refused. The sole survivor must submit the mission and clear his own name, Alaric explained. Otherwise people may question my account. There it was. I was useful as a witness and dangerous as a loose end. The corpse cloud rose before I could step off. Its control seal ignored every command except the route Alaric had chosen. I tried turning it south. The cloud rotated me back toward Blackveil like an annoyed parent. Alaric waved from the city wall. The city fox had helped me, exploited me, and mailed me home before breakfast. Efficient predator. While that cloud carried me back, the grudge saber's wound pattern was already pointing at somebody else. Roderick later told me what happened before I arrived. Bastion's senior relative took the 3 deaths to the Crowhurst family elder. The bodies carried blood-right wounds. The famous grudge saber had belonged to Roderick, and every witness inside my courtyard was dead. The elder blamed Roderick for ordering the killings and erasing the witnesses. Then the 3 families sent Magnus Renfield, Cassian's powerful senior relative, straight to Roderick's residence. Magnus kicked through the gate and accused Roderick in front of his own disciples. Roderick denied everything. Magnus punched him through a wall. Roderick tried naming Seraphine. Magnus hit him again and promised to pay whatever fine Blackveil charged for the beating. By the time Roderick woke, half his courtyard was broken. His face looked like someone had argued with it using a hammer. He had been punished for my murders with his own former weapon as the evidence. My unwilling sponsor had received another invoice before learning my crime existed. The corpse cloud delivered me to Blackveil's task hall that afternoon. I submitted the ferret, the flower demon, and Alaric's confirmation. The clerk paid me 167 stones. 2 Judgment Hall officers chained my wrists before I could pocket them. By the time they dragged me into the hall, the 74,800 stone assessment was already on the table. Representatives from Bastion, Thane, and Cassian's families sat behind it. They didn't care who attacked first. I had buried 3 bodies. My earlier 90,000 estimate had been panic math. The official number was smaller and still completely insane. I looked at my 167 stones. The walking fine remained underfunded. Bastion's representative leaned forward. He buried them under his own yard. This is the animal Roderick chose? Thane's representative laughed at my burned robe. 3 deaths, and Roderick can't even train a proper assassin. Cassian's representative placed a black payment seal beside the assessment. They thought I was Roderick's disposable knife, and they wanted to break that knife in front of him. The families will cover the assessment, one representative announced. I looked at the officer. And by what? Your execution. Blackveil had turned my debt into a purchase price for my life. I pulled against the chains. I've got 3 months to pay. Qualified party can settle immediately, the representative replied. They're paying my fine so they can kill me. The officer didn't blink. Correct. I pointed at the payment seal. Then stop it. I've got a guarantor. That froze the room, the officer asked. Name him. Roderick Westfall. Roderick was already their suspected mastermind. My answer turned that theory into a financial obligation. The officers carried me straight to his residence. Roderick emerged in fresh robes over fresh bandages. One eye was swollen, his lower lip was split. He saw me between the officers and grabbed my throat. You killed Cassian and the other 2. Lifted my chained wrists. Good afternoon, sponsor. Magnus beat me unconscious because your saber wounds pointed at me. Technically, it used to be your saber. His grip tightened until my boots left the ground. The officer opened the guarantee tablet. Will Roderick Westfall guarantee Kieran Blackwood's 74,800 stone assessment for 3 months? Roderick looked towards Seraphine's peak. He hated me, but Seraphine had taken me aboard her ship and ordered her maids to watch me. Refusing in public could look like defiance. He dropped me, pressed his blood seal onto the tablet, and locked the guarantee. The family payment seal went back across the table. My execution purchase failed. After the officers left, Roderick punched me across the courtyard. I hit a pillar and checked my teeth. That was unnecessary. He pointed at his bandages. This was unnecessary. Fair point. Then Roderick read the amount again. 74,800! He spat blood onto his own seal. One officer looked at the stain, then at me, and decided not to smile. Roderick noticed anyway. His glare made one thing clear: earning the money would be safer than celebrating. He couldn't cover the assessment either. If I failed, my debt became his problem. Murdering me would ruin his finances. Beautiful system. Roderick checked my cultivation and the healed injuries beneath my robe. You killed 2 Layer 4 disciples and 1 Layer 5 disciple with little lasting damage. They damaged me plenty. You're standing. I heal out of spite. He stared at me, then shoved a profession list into my chest. Learn something profitable. Talismans, beast taming, alchemy. I don't care. Earn the stones. My sponsor had moved from trying to kill me to demanding career development, growth. With 3 months bought, I visited Blackveil's profitable professions. Artifact forging ended first. The instructor used a whip to correct posture and looked far too happy when students missed a hammer strike. One disciple thanked her after being hit. I left before the workshop discovered my boundaries. Talisman craft looked calmer until the instructor unrolled living human skin as premium paper. The skin blinked. I returned the brush. The beast-taming teacher gave a speech about trust while feeding a chained wolf. The wolf removed his arm before the speech ended. I crossed beast-taming off the list while the arm was still airborne. Alchemy was my last option. The lecture room contained no whips, living paper, or escaped limbs. An old instructor demonstrated one bone-tempering pill recipe while the system listened inside my head. Unrecorded profession detected. Record pill refining? I accepted. After class, I bought 2 ingredient sets and rented the cheapest furnace room available. The room smelled burned, but every wall remained attached. Temporary luxury. I loaded the first ingredients and started one-click hosting. The system controlled my hands through every cut, heat change, and seal. Half an hour later, the furnace opened. 12 bone tempering pills rested inside. Each pill was smooth, dark, and almost perfectly pure. I had expected 1 usable batch. The system had produced 12 pills better than anything the lecture showed. I started the second ingredient set immediately. Halfway through, my spiritual energy emptied, the furnace exploded, the door flew off and smoke filled the room. I landed beneath a broken table with 1 perfect batch still inside my robe. I had discovered scalable income and a scalable repair bill in the same hour, so I carried the 12 pills to the pill exchange before the room owner found me. A bright feathered parrot perched above the counter. It looked at my burned robe and shouted, "Poor! Poor! Stolen goods!" The junior clerk laughed. A purchaser waiting beside him glanced at my patched sleeve. Bone? Tempering pills? From his check whether the bottle still has its owner's name. The clerk tipped 1 pill onto a dirty tray. Low-grade baseline is 5 stones. These are probably failed leftovers. He pushed the bottle back without testing it. The clerk left my pill on the dirty tray. The purchaser laughed again, and the parrot shouted, "Stolen goods!" loud enough for the room to hear. The market owner entered from the rear room and stopped mid-step. He smelled the pill from across the counter. Then he slapped the junior clerk hard enough to make the parrot flap into the ceiling. "Clean tray," the owner snapped. "Now." Beside him, the purchaser straightened. The clerk's laugh died. The owner lifted the pill with 2 fingers and examined its surface under a spirit lamp. His voice changed when he addressed me. 40 stones for this one. A woman beside the entrance answered before I could. Figgity. Celestia Morn was a talented alchemist, known for arguing with anyone who treated pill quality casually. She wore a pale blue robe and carried her own appraisal case. The parrot's counter looked unworthy of her. She checked the pill, then looked at my burned sleeve. "You didn't refine this?" Celestia decided. I smiled. "Good afternoon to you too." Celestia's mouth curved. "Introduce me to the alchemist. I'll pay 50 for the pill and arrange access to my elder." In my defense, her smile made prestige sound attractive. The 74,800 stone debt made cash sound better. The owner raised his hand. 60, with a premium for every pill of equal quality. Celestia leaned closer. "My elder can give a real alchemist more than a shop counter." I tapped the bottle. "I need money now." "You would choose 60 stones over access to an alchemy elder?" I answered. "I would choose 60 stones over a beautiful invitation, which should tell you how ugly my debt is." Celestia's eyebrows lifted. "Was that flattery?" I shrugged. "It was financial disclosure." The junior clerk looked between us and forgot to hide his jealousy. The owner noticed and moved the bottle farther from him. His status had fallen below the parrot's. Celestia studied me like that answer had become another clue. The owner opened the bottle. He tested a second pill. Top grade. Then a third. Top grade again. The room stopped watching my robe. The owner tested all 12. Every pill was top grade. The market owner locked the front door. Customers who had been leaving turned around. A nearby seller carried his own tray closer, hoping the master might appear behind me. Word spread across the room before anyone knew whose name to whisper. The purchaser who had called them stolen stepped away from the counter. The junior clerk cleaned the same spotless tray 3 times. Celestia checked 2 pills herself, then closed her appraisal case with unusual care. 1 lucky pill can happen, she admitted. 12 can't. The owner asked for the master's name. Celestia asked for an introduction. Even the parrot changed its chant to Grandmaster, Grandmaster. I could not let them connect the batch to my system, so I gave them the safest dangerous answer available. Roderick Westfall supplied them. The owner nodded like an entire mystery had become reasonable. Celestia's eyes narrowed. Roderick's name connected the famous saber, Seraphine's ship, and my impossible product. My lie had found a believable victim. The final sale paid 620 stones, plus a small bottle of pills useful for Foundation realm preparation. I took the money, refused Celestia's invitation, and left before anybody asked me to refine in front of them. Behind me, the pill exchange began hunting for Roderick's hidden alchemy master. That master did not exist. Too bad my unwilling sponsor did. Lucille came to collect her 7-day blood step deadline before the 7th day had even arrived. I had just returned to my room with 620 stones. Then, black ribbons slid from the ceiling and tied both wrists behind my chair. The smiling ghost appeared across the table, crossed one leg, and examined my face like she was choosing where to cut first. Kieran, Lucille purred, have you prepared your final excuse? I looked at the bindings. Is this the friendly version of the test? The friendly version leaves fewer scars. She leaned closer. Her smile was gorgeous. Her threats were better organized. In my defense, I told her, the smile keeps distracting me from the attempted dissection. Lucille tapped my forehead. 7 days. Master Bloodstep, or I open you and find out why our master cares. She had not finished the sentence when I triggered the technique. Blood energy snapped through my legs. I vanished from the chair, crossed the room, and reappeared behind her with the black ribbons hanging empty. Lucille's smile remained on the wrong side of the table. I stepped back through the same path and sat down again. I asked, do I still need the excuse? She checked the chair, the ribbons, and my feet. Her teasing posture disappeared. Bloodstep carried a distinct circulation pattern. A fake would not fool her. Lucille reached for my ankle. I used Bloodstep a second time and appeared on the windowsill. Her hand closed on air. That confidence lasted about 3 seconds. You mastered it already, she said. I shrugged. The spider's nursery offered practical training. Lucille's eyes narrowed. That art normally takes half a month, I pointed at her. You said 7 days. A very small pause answered before she did. Lucille released the ribbons and vanished through the wall without another threat. She even forgot to flirt on the way out. Tragic. Later that evening, Vespera came through my locked door carrying 2 deadline slips. Her usual blank calm was gone, her jaw was tight, and Lucille was nowhere behind her. Vespera laid both slips on my table. Lucille's showed 7 days. Seraphine's original order showed 15 in cold silver ink. Lucille shortened our master's order because your panic amused her, Vespera said. Seraphine punished her. She was still bleeding when I left Moonveil Court, though her soul imprint remained intact. I tapped the 7-day slip. The joke aged badly. Vespera flattened one hand over the silver order. Frost spread around her fingers. The 6 desires technique strengthened our master, then destabilized her cultivation, Vespera said. If rival branches see that weakness, they can challenge her saintess position. Her eyes lifted to mine. She believes the first great surge passed through you. Your conscious participation may matter. She didn't explain what Seraphine planned to do with that theory. Will she be angry with me? I asked. Vespera opened the door. Lucille is angry with herself. I nodded toward the slip. That sounds healthy. It's temporary. Vespera left. I folded the silver order, hid it under my robe, and went back to the massive fine. Over the next several days, I refined batch after batch. The system kept the quality stable, but my own energy remained the limit. After every furnace, I had to rest or consume medicine before starting again. I swallowed 1 top-grade pill when my energy ran low. The medicine hit harder than the ordinary versions I had stolen from Roderick. My bones tightened, my aura climbed, and I broke into body, tempering layer 5 beside a cooling furnace. The breakthrough rattled the furnace room and made the cooling lid jump. I caught it before it hit the ceiling. Even my level-ups were trying to send invoices. Personal growth had terrible manners. The new layer improved my furnace control and made every future batch easier. It also made selling them harder. One poor layer 4 disciple carrying 12 perfect pills could be a messenger. The same man returning with dozens looked like the actual alchemist. Every batch smelled identical and carried the same perfect medicinal ring. If I kept using Roderick's name, somebody would demand the hidden master in person. I needed a disguise. I borrowed a long robe, covered my face, raised my voice, and walked into a different shop with one bottle. The shopkeeper looked up once. "Kieran Blackwood," he greeted me. "Why are you dressed like that?" I turned around without answering. My career as a mysterious female alchemist lasted 4 seconds. New personal record. The shopkeeper laughed loudly enough for 2 customers to turn and inspect my robe as I escaped. The hidden master lie had become too large to manage alone, so I went to the man whose name I had attached to it. When I reached Roderick's courtyard, 2 women were leaving through the broken gate Magnus had created. Celestia Morn walked first, carrying the same appraisal case she had used at the pill exchange. Her older sister followed beside her with enough pressure to make Roderick's guards stare at the ground. Celestia stopped at the gate and looked back toward Roderick's hall. "You took the frost marrow opportunity," she called, "and now you're hiding the alchemist who produced those pills." Roderick shouted from inside, "I don't refine pills," Celestia's sister answered. "Then introduce the person who does." Cup shattered inside the hall. Celestia and her sister passed me without slowing. I slipped behind a stone pillar and waited for Roderick's anger to choose another target. His hand closed around the back of my failed disguise robe. He dragged me into the hall and threw me beside the broken cup. "You used my name," Roderick said. I shrugged. "It tested well with customers." Roderick pointed at the broken cup. "Celestia Morn and her sister have visited me 3 times. They want a grandmaster I've never met. They also believe I stole their chance at the frost marrow flame, a rare alchemy fire." I glanced at the cup. "I can see why that would be inconvenient." Roderick drew his blade halfway. "Give me one reason not to kill you." Looked toward the empty rafters. "Lucille," I called. "Roderick wants permission." Roderick's blade stopped. No maid appeared. I kept looking upward like I expected one. His eyes moved to the shadows. On Seraphine's skyship, he had watched the ghost maids force him to obey his own declared limit. He had already seen what happened when he guessed wrong about my connection. "You're bluffing," he said. I lifted my chin, then finished drawing the blade. He did not. My unwilling sponsor hated uncertainty more than he hated me, so he chose a test that could save face either way. "Refine the pills here," Roderick ordered. "If you fail, I kill you. If you succeed, we discuss the mess you created." He called Petra Ashdown into the hall. Petra was his senior disciple, the woman responsible for preparing mission resources when Roderick wanted something done properly. She wore a black travel robe and carried a narrow coffin-shaped case across her back. Her first action was to move the furnace away from Roderick's cracked wall. "Master," Petra observed, "one explosion may finish what Magnus started." Roderick glared at her. "Prepare the ingredients." Petra placed a full bone-tempering pill set beside the furnace and looked at my burned sleeves. "Have you refined under observation before?" she asked. I answered, "No." "Good. Then nobody has taught you nervous habits." I liked her immediately. Roderick looked annoyed that she sounded encouraging. I started one-click hosting. The system took my hands through the same precise sequence. Petra watched the heat. Roderick watched my face, waiting for Lucille to appear or the furnace to fail. Half an hour later, the lid opened. 12 pills rested inside. Petra lifted the first one under the spirit lamp. "Top grade," she announced. Roderick's jaw tightened. She tested the second, then the third. "Top grade. Top grade." I leaned toward Roderick. "Would you like me to introduce you to the Grandmaster?" His stare could have refined a cheaper pill by itself. Petra checked the whole batch and turned the bottle in her hand. "Everyone is top grade." The heat control didn't waver once. Petra rolled one pill between her fingers and checked the fragrance again. She had prepared thousands of ingredient sets for Roderick's branch. Her second inspection mattered more than his first glare. When she nodded, guards outside the hall went polite. She held one pill toward me. "Did you learn this from the hidden master?" I glanced at Roderick. "Apparently I'm standing inside his residence." Petra laughed once. Roderick did not. He took the bottle from her and inspected it personally. Then he opened his own cabinet, removed an ordinary bone-tempering pill, and placed both versions under the same lamp. Mine carried a cleaner ring and denser medicine. The comparison erased the final excuse. Roderick slid his blade fully back into its sheath. Then he checked my cultivation. "Layer 5? Smiled. "Career growth." Petra glanced between us. "How long was he layer 4? Roderick did not answer. Jealousy crossed his face before he buried it under calculation. He had spent years building rank. I had robbed him, taken his saber, and made him guarantee my debt. Then I used his name as an alchemy brand and reached layer 5 inside the same disaster. Honestly, I could see why he kept punching me. Roderick placed a map on the table. A rare frost marrow flame burned inside Frostgrave Chasm. An alchemist who absorbed it could refine colder, purer medicine and control difficult furnaces. Roderick offered me the chance to claim it. I folded the map. Go! Petra looked at me. Roderick looked personally offended. "The frost marrow flame is worth more than your courtyard," he said. I spread one hand. "My courtyard contains 3 former roommates. Value is complicated." Roderick struck the table. "Why refuse?" I tapped the map. Because rare fire doesn't cancel 74,800 stones. I unfolded the map and pushed it back toward him. I said, "Pay my fine if I return with the flame." Roderick stared at me. I held his gaze. "You offered prestige." "I asked for the bill." Petra's mouth twitched. "She hid it by checking the ingredient tray." Roderick finally agreed. If I absorbed the Frostmarrow flame, he would settle the murder assessment before the 3-month deadline. I made him repeat the promise. He hated that part most. Roderick assigned Petra to lead the expedition. Gunnar Crowford joined as an experienced fighter. The moment he saw Roderick's premium medicine pouch in Petra's hand, his expression turned sour. Evander Reinhardt carried the formation knowledge needed to expose the flame. He spoke gently, offered to check my travel gear, and acted like the reasonable man in a hostile group. That made him easier to like and harder to trust. Petra handed me a sealed medicine pouch. "Keep this on your body. Gunnar will complain either way." Gunnar folded his arms. "Those supplies belong to disciples who earned them." I tucked the pouch away, then survived long enough to ask for them back. Petra stepped between us before the argument became a fight. Gunnar saw her choose my survival over his pride, and his jaw tightened. Roderick also handed me a 100-mile escape talisman. "Use this if the chasm turns against you," he ordered. I tucked it inside my robe. "Does it work on debt?" "No." "Then we're still improving the product." Petra took the front with the map. Gunnar walked behind me with open contempt. Evander kept smiling like the reasonable one. I left for Frostgrave Chasm with one loyal-looking senior, 2 dangerous escorts, and a promise from Roderick that sounded far too good. On the road to Frostgrave Chasm, Gunnar started resenting me before the first monster appeared. Evander kept smiling and offering help. I trusted the open resentment more. Roderick had supplied premium medicine, a formation set, and the 100-mile escape talisman. Gunnar counted each item like I had stolen it from his pocket. "This expedition is wasting branch resources on a Layer 5 newcomer," Gunnar complained. Petra Ashdown kept walking at the front. Roderick ordered the mission. Gunnar pointed at me. Roderick also gave him the grudge saber, and look how that ended. I rested the saber across my shoulder. It ended very well for the saber. Petra hid a smile. Evander Reinhardt stepped beside me and lowered his voice. "Ignore Gunnar. He measures value by how long someone has served the branch." I asked. "And how do you measure it?" Evander replied. "By whether someone survives long enough to become useful." He smiled warmly after saying that. Reasonable wording, terrible undertone. Petra stopped at the entrance to Frostgrave Chasm. Black mist rolled below the cliff, carrying cold spiritual pressure strong enough to make my teeth ache. She looked at all 3 of us. "Inside the chasm, stay within sight. The dark energy attacks the mind before the body. Dreamwood attacks desire. Whitebone Marsh attacks whatever remains." Gunnar scoffed. "He will need the talisman before the first turn," Petra answered. "Then you will help him reach the first turn." Gunnar's mouth closed. That was the second time Petra had chosen my survival in front of Gunnar. I moved closer to her before we descended. Roderick told me later what happened behind us after we left. Magnus Renfield learned that Roderick had sent me after the flame and left his peak. Roderick intercepted him outside the order and issued a direct challenge. My unwilling sponsor had no sudden affection for me. If Magnus killed me before I paid the assessment, Roderick inherited 74,800 stones. Financial panic had finally made him heroic. Their clash delayed Magnus long enough for us to enter the chasm. It did not make him turn back. The chasm pressure hit me before both feet touched the lower path. Cold energy drove into my chest and pulled every violent thought toward the surface. My breathing broke. The grudge saber hummed against my side, eager to answer. I had reached Layer 5 quickly. Experience had not come with it. Frostgrave did not care about my impressive speedrun. My knees dipped. Petra caught my shoulder and sent a stream of steady spiritual energy through my back. The pressure inside my chest loosened enough for me to stand. "Breathe with my rhythm," she ordered. I matched her breathing and regained control. Gunnar laughed behind us. "This is the genius Roderick spent a fortune protecting?" Petra did not turn. "This is the alchemist carrying the reason we entered." Gunnar's laugh stopped. Evander offered me a wooden support staff. "The ground worsens ahead. Hold this and follow my steps." He had defended me without challenging Gunnar. He also knew the route. Petra nodded once, so I accepted the staff. We reached Dreamwood at the first dead tree. Its trunks were white, its leaves were black, and every path bent behind another path. Petra ordered Gunnar to guard the rear while Evander guided me through the center. Evander walked 10 paces ahead. Then he disappeared. No warning, no sound. The staff in my hand grew warm. I called, "Evander?" His footsteps continued somewhere ahead, but I could not see him. I followed the sound around one tree and found Seraphine Ashcroft waiting in a clearing. She wore the same dark veil and silver bells. Her eyes softened when she saw me. That was the first problem. The real Seraphine had pinned me to a floor, stolen half months from my calendar, and thrown manuals at my head. This woman smiled like I had arrived for dinner. "Kieran," the illusion murmured. "Come closer." In my defense, Dreamwood had chosen an excellent face. It had also chosen the wrong personality. Seraphine reached for my hand. Put down the saber, you don't need it with me. The real Seraphine would have taken the saber and criticized my grip. I stepped back. The illusion's smile became warmer. The clearing smelled like Seraphine's private court. Even the cracked silver bell from our first collision hung at her wrist. Dreamwood had pulled details from my own memory. It did not know how she used them. Come here, the false Seraphine repeated. I'll give you what you want. The grudge saber cleared its sheath. I answered, what I want is a less obvious trap. Her expression twisted. I slashed through her shoulder. Pain tore across my own chest. The clearing flickered. My saber had turned toward me inside the illusion. The blade was cutting down toward my ribs while my mind saw an enemy in front of it. I forced the edge away, but vines wrapped my wrist and dragged it back. The false Seraphine smiled again. You know you want this, I snapped. I want you to speak like the woman whose face you stole. Raised the blade for another strike. A bare hand caught the edge. Blood ran across Petra's palm. Her other hand struck my forehead. The clearing shattered. I was standing between two white trees with the grudge saber pressed against my own chest. Petra held the blade in one bleeding hand and my collar in the other. Evander was gone. Petra ripped the saber from my grip and threw it into the dirt. What did you see? She demanded. I answered, Seraphine. Petra's eyebrows moved once. Of course you did. Looked at her bleeding palm. That sounded judgmental. Petra replied. It was. She wrapped the wound without asking for thanks. I explained that Evander had vanished after handing me the staff. Petra examined the wood, snapped it in half, and found a black thread running through the center. Her face hardened. We find the exit first, Petra ordered. Then we find him. The broken staff woke the forest. Roots tore through the ground. Black vines sealed the path behind us. 3 more Seraphine illusions stepped between the trees, each wearing a different expression stolen from my memory. One attacked with silver bells. Another reached for my throat. The third simply ordered me to kneel, which made her dangerously convincing. Petra drove a palm through the first illusion. I cut the second. The third vanished and reappeared behind me, opening a wound across my back before I turned. We moved toward the outer path. The tree shifted and returned us to the same broken staff. Petra's breathing grew rough. Every time she used her power, the chasm's dark energy pressed harder against her. She had spent energy keeping me upright before entering Dreamwood. Now the forest was billing her again. A wall of vines closed around us. I pulled out the 100-mile escape talisman. One person can activate it cleanly, I told her. Take it and leave. Petra stared at the talisman, then at me. Petra answered. Roderick ordered me to bring you to the flame, replied. Roderick also promised to pay my fine. His promises are under review. Petra pushed the talisman back against my chest. This isn't about Roderick. She had every reason to save herself. Instead, she turned toward the vines and pulled the narrow, coffin-shaped case from her back. The case expanded into a black coffin taller than she was. Ancient chains wrapped its lid. A low knock came from inside. Petra's face lost color before she touched the first seal. This stays closed unless the alternative is death, she warned. The vines tightened around my ankles. Then open it, I told her. We're out of time. Petra opened the coffin. Black chains exploded through the clearing. They tore apart the nearest vines, pierced the shifting trees, and dragged the false Seraphines into the coffin's shadow. Something red moved behind the half-open lid, but the chains blocked my view before I could identify it. The forest screamed through every trunk. Petra seized my wrist and ran. Each chain she controlled drained more color from her face. Blood reached the corner of her mouth. She kept pulling me through the collapsing path while the coffin ripped open one root after another. A vine caught my leg. Petra cut it with a chain and nearly fell. I caught her before she hit the ground. She shoved us both across the final root line. Dreamwood vanished behind us. The coffin shrank, its chains returned, and Petra sealed it with shaking fingers. Her vitality had dropped enough for me to feel the change in her aura. She tried to hide the weakness by tightening the coffin straps. Her hand missed the buckle once. That mistake frightened me more than the screaming forest had. Petra was the strongest person beside me, and Dreamwood had made her hands shake. She had saved me twice. The second rescue cost her something she could not replace quickly. Gunnar and Evander waited on the outer path. Evander hurried forward with practiced concern. Petra, we lost sight of you. Dreamwood shifted the route. Gunnar looked at the blood on her mouth, then at me. He caused this? Petra stepped between us before I answered. Evander handed him a threaded guide staff and disappeared. Evander spread both hands. The forest separated us. I looked at his clean robe, steady breathing, and complete lack of injuries. Petra's gaze followed mine. She did not accuse him yet. We still needed his formation knowledge to reach the flame, so the 4 of us continued onto the yin-yang serpent path. A narrow ridge curved over a bottomless crack. One side burned hot, the other froze every loose stone. Evander positioned himself behind me. He kept offering instructions I had not requested. Step left, Kieran. I stepped right. Slow down near the bend. I sped up. His breathing tightened each time I ignored him. At the narrowest point, his sleeve moved behind my shoulder. I jumped first. The ridge vanished beneath my feet, Gunnar shouted. Petra reached for me. Evander froze with one hand half raised. I twisted during the fall and pointed upward. I shouted. Evander pushed me! Then I activated Bloodstep. Red energy burst beneath my feet. I crossed the cliff face, curved around the ridge, and landed behind him. Evander turned so quickly he nearly fell without my help. I brushed dust from my robe. Terrible technique. Bloodstep has taught me better ways to throw people off cliffs. Petra looked at Evander's raised hand. He lowered it. He jumped on his own. Did, I agreed. Before you could. Gunnar opened his mouth to defend him. Petra struck first. She pressed a black flower seal into Evander's chest. Illusory chains snapped around his arms and legs. Every movement pulled them tighter. Evander dropped to one knee. Petra asked, "Why did you abandon him in Dreamwood?" Evander repeated. "The forest separated us." The chains tightened. "Why was your guide staff threaded?" Evander tried the same answer. The flower opened another layer. His scream traveled down the ridge. Petra did not look at Gunnar. "Do you want to defend him now?" Gunnar stepped back. Evander remained alive because we still needed his formation. Gunnar stopped defending him. Evander's hatred finally reached his face. At the bottom of Frostgrave Chasm, Whitebone Marsh spread beneath a ceiling of blue ice. The Frostmarrow flame burned at its center. Pale fire floated above black water without consuming anything around it. Cold pressure rolled from each flicker and left frost across my lashes. Evander set the formation under Petra's watch. Its only job was to force the flame's loose dark energy outward so a cultivator could absorb the core. Petra held the control plate instead of returning it to him. She looked at me. "Once the core enters your body, the pain will be severe. Circulate the fire absorption technique exactly as trained." I adjusted the grudge saber. "Small issue," Gunnar sneered. "Of course there is," told them. "I don't know the fire absorption technique." Evander stopped placing the final flag. Gunnar stared at Roderick's expensive medicine pouch on my belt. "We crossed Frostgrave for someone who never learned the basic art," I admitted. "I learned there was a basic art 30 seconds ago. Main character entrance. Tutorial missing." Gunnar pointed toward the return path. "End the mission. He will burn to ash." Petra slapped him. The sound crossed the marsh. He reached Layer 5, mastered Bloodstep, and refined top-grade pills, Petra told him. "You can spend half an hour teaching one technique." Gunnar's cheek darkened. From then on, he watched Petra's back instead of the path. Petra ignored him and demonstrated one fire absorption circulation. She locked my breathing to hers, pushed one cold current through my channels, and made me repeat the route once. The cycle numbed my fingertips. Pale sparks were already crawling across the marsh when the auto-cultivation system chimed. "Unrecorded technique detected. Record fire absorption technique!" I accepted. Petra took the formation controls from Evander and wrapped him inside a black chain cocoon before starting the purification. He glared through the chains. "You need me to maintain the array," Petra answered. "I need you unable to push Kieran into it." "Good answer." The formation activated. Dark mist peeled away from the Frostmarrow flame. Its pale core sharpened until every breath hurt. Petra grabbed my arm. "We moved to a safer cave. You practiced for half a month before touching the core." I looked at her pale face and the blood drying near her mouth. Keeping the formation active was already draining the vitality Dreamwood had taken. "No," I told her. "We do it now." Petra grabbed my arm. "One mistake will burn through your channels," I told her. "Half a month will burn through you first." I stepped into the formation before Gunnar could laugh again. Then I started one-click hosting. The system took my body and reached into the Frostmarrow flame. Cold fire entered my palm. Pain tore through every channel at once. My vision went white. The flame moved from my arm into my chest, freezing my skin while burning underneath it. Hosting kept my posture steady. Gunnar stared at my knees, waiting for them to buckle. I remained standing. The Frostmarrow core began shrinking inside the formation. Petra tightened both hands around the controls. Evander stared through his cocoon. Gunnar's fingers drifted toward the steel needles hidden inside his sleeve. I took that as one warning. If either man meant to stop me, the shrinking flame had put a clock on him. Far above Whitebone Marsh, another aura entered Frostgrave Chasm. Roderick's delay had run out. Magnus Renfield was coming down fast now. Magnus Renfield reached Whitebone Marsh while the Frostmarrow flame was still inside my body. Magnus filled my vision. His voice reached me. The system kept every finger outside my control. One-click hosting held me inside the formation while the pale core shrank against my palm. Every pulse froze my skin and burned beneath it. Petra stood beside the controls with blood on her mouth and too little vitality left. Behind her, Evander's black chain cocoon cracked. He had watched the flame grow smaller. Once the core became mine, his last clean chance to kill me disappeared, so the traitor chose violence. Evander tore one arm through the chains and drove a formation spike toward my back. Petra turned the control plate sideways and blocked it. The impact knocked her across the marsh. She landed on one knee, still holding the plate. Then Magnus descended between us. The Revenge Addict carried Foundation Realm pressure, a full realm above our group. One sleeve was torn from fighting Roderick on the way down. His arrival flattened the marsh water and shattered the remaining chains around Evander. Magnus looked past everybody and fixed on me. "You killed Cassian Renfield," Magnus growled. "Now you get to watch every person beside you choose whether you're really worth dying for." Good. He had arrived with a speech. "Villains love wasting the exact seconds they claim you do not have." Petra forced herself upright. "This is Roderick's expedition. Leave." Magnus laughed. "Roderick already failed to stop me." He lifted one hand toward Gunnar. Petra ordered, "Take Kieran and run." Gunnar finally showed the steel needles hidden in his sleeve. He pointed them at me. "I crossed Frostgrave Chasm for that flame," Gunnar snapped. "Roderick spent medicines on a Layer 5 nobody, and Petra nearly died protecting him. I'm completely done carrying your mistake." Petra's face went still. "Then stand with Magnus and say it clearly." Gunnar stepped beside Evander. There it was. The escort who complained about every pill had finally put his resentment on the table. Petra stood alone between three enemies in my controlled body. Blood marked her mouth. Her vitality faded. Petra did not move away. Magnus smiled at me. "Feel abandoned yet?" I could not answer. Hosting kept drawing the frost marrow core through my channels. Petra answered for me. "You came here for revenge against Roderick's branch," she told Magnus. "I belong to that branch, so come through me." Petra seized the black coffin lid and planted herself directly between me and Magnus. The lid split apart. Black chains struck Magnus from three directions. He broke the first with his forearm and caught the second around one fist. The third wrapped his ankle and dragged a trench through the marsh. Petra pulled with both hands. The coffin shook behind her. Something in red moved beneath the chains. Magnus tore free and hit Petra with one palm. She crossed the marsh, struck the coffin, and coughed blood onto its lid. The formation controls fell from her hand. Gunnar raised his needles. Evander picked up the dropped spike. Magnus walked toward me slowly because killing me was no longer enough. He wanted me awake for the humiliation. Honestly, I do not know why revenge addicts keep adding theater. Finish the job or lose the stage. Those are the options. A stitched shadow appeared beneath Magnus's boots. He stopped. The shadow climbed his legs like black embroidery sewn into the air. One silver thread wrapped his wrist. Another crossed his throat. Magnus struck the thread. The entire marsh vanished around him. One moment he stood 10 steps away. The next, only a square of embroidered darkness remained. Vespera Nightwell had arrived. Seraphine's colder ghost maid never announced herself. She removed the strongest enemy and left everybody else to understand the message. Evander stared at the empty space. Gunnar's needles lowered by an inch. Their powerful patron had disappeared. Their bad decisions remained. Petra pushed away from the coffin. "You two still have time to crawl." Evander looked at his broken chains and laughed. "You can barely stand." Petra wiped the blood from her mouth. "And you failed to kill Kieran twice while I was healthy." Evander's face tightened. He drove the formation spike toward Petra. The red figure inside the coffin moved first. A girl in a red robe stepped through the half-open lid. Her face remained hidden behind hanging hair. Pale bone spikes unfolded from her shoulders and crossed the marsh before Evander finished his thrust. One spike knocked the weapon away. Another pinned his sleeve to the ground. Gunnar released every steel needle at once. The red-clad spirit turned. Bone plates snapped together and blocked the barrage. Then one spike swept Gunnar off his feet and sent him through a formation flag. Petra had released a monster to stop two traitors. The monster did not care which side Petra preferred. The red-clad spirit turned toward me. Its bone spikes flexed. Petra seized one coffin chain and dragged it sideways. "Back!" The spirit ignored her. Gunnar used that opening. A fan of steel needles struck Petra's shoulder guard and knocked her away from the coffin. Evander tore his sleeve free, released a black goo insect and sent it toward my throat. 3 remaining needles curved toward my chest. Hosting kept my right hand inside the frost marrow core. The last pale flame collapsed. Cold fire exploded through my chest. Frost marrow flame absorbed. The formation shattered. Pale frost spread across the marsh, freezing the needles in midair. Gunnar stared as his attack stopped less than a hand from me. The flame was mine. Frost marrow hosting released me. My body was burned, numb, and barely able to hold the saber. Evander's goo insect broke through the frost and reached my collar. "Petra," I forced out, "if the next hosting turns on you, strike below my left shoulder." Outside force breaks control. Then I opened the blood-right blade art. If normal fighting was unavailable, criminal customer service could use the enemies already volunteering as materials. Begin one-click hosting? I accepted. My body drew the grudge saber. Evander saw the blood pattern and backed away. He had watched the system's calm posture through the flame. Now that same posture turned toward him. "No!" Evander whispered. Hosting crossed the distance before his second breath. The grudge saber cut through the goo insect and struck Evander once. Blood energy rose from him and rushed into the blade. His stolen formation spike fell from his hand. Evander had tried twice to throw me into death traps. On the third attempt, he became cultivation material. The system drained enough strength to move again. Then it turned toward Gunnar. Gunnar grabbed Petra from behind and pressed a needle against her throat. "Stop him!" Gunnar ordered. "Or she dies!" Petra answered with force. She drove her elbow into his ribs and gave the system a clean line. Hosting used it. Bloodstep carried me behind Gunnar. The grudge saber crossed his back before he could turn. He released Petra and stumbled forward. Gunnar still tried to throw the last needle. The system caught his wrist, redirected the needle into the ground and completed the blood-right cut. His strength poured into the blade. Gunnar spent the entire mission calling me a waste of resources. Then he finally became one himself. The two traitors were dead. The frost marrow flame burned inside me. Petra remained alive. Then Hosting faced the red-clad spirit. Of course it did. My system had never understood when the battle was over. The coffin spirit raised 6 bone spikes. The grudge saber answered with blood-red light. Petra moved between us. She drove 2 fingers into the point I had named below my left shoulder. The same kind of outside strike had interrupted Hosting during the roommate fight. Control snapped back. I fell to one knee and caught myself on the saber. The red-clad spirit attacked anyway. A bone spike stopped beside my face. Black coffin chains wrapped its arms, waist, and throat. Petra pulled until the spirit slid backward across the marsh. The girl clawed at the ground. The chains dragged her into the coffin. Petra slammed the lid and sealed it with a shaking hand. Only then did she let herself fall against the side. I reached for her. A black boot kicked my hand away. Vespera stood beside us. Seraphine's colder ghost maid held a small embroidered doll. Fresh blood stained the doll's chest. "Magnus lives," Vespera told me. "He swore he won't ever touch you or reveal this encounter before you enter the inner branch." I looked at the blood on the doll. "What happens if he breaks the oath?" Vespera folded it into her sleeve. "He learns why he shouldn't ever." I tried to thank her. She nudged my shoulder with one boot and kept me kneeling. "Our master dislikes useless people," Vespera said. "Keep proving you're still not one." Then she vanished. Conditional protection, very comforting. Seraphine's people would stop a branch master, but only after I absorbed the rare flame and killed my own traitors. Petra laughed once against the coffin. "You attract strange women." I looked at the sealed monster beside her. "That judgment feels competitive." Her laugh turned into a cough. I gave her medicine from the pouch Gunnar had resented and helped her away from Whitebone Marsh. She tried to walk without leaning on me and failed on the second step. Petra had spent blood, vitality, and a coffin monster keeping me alive. Using my shoulder was the smallest debt I had collected that day. 2 days later, we returned to Roderick's courtyard. My bandaged guarantor listened while Petra reported Evander's betrayal, Gunnar's needles, Magnus's arrival, and Vespera's intervention. Roderick's face improved with every detail about Magnus' suffering. When Petra mentioned the embroidered doll, he laughed so hard his damaged ribs punished him. "Magnus finally met someone above his station," Roderick said. I placed one palm on his table. Frostmarrow chilled the wood beneath it. "Good. Pay my 74,800 stone fine." Roderick stopped laughing. Roderick studied the frost. "You own Frostmarrow now?" I answered. "That was the bargain." Roderick tapped it. "The flame makes your alchemy valuable," I told him. "That line means you're already breaking the bargain." Roderick leaned back. "Earn the stones yourself." My unwilling sponsor had promised to clear the fine if I succeeded. I returned, burned, betrayed, and carrying the flame. He moved the goalpost before Petra finished sitting down. I tightened my grip on the table. Roderick tapped the guarantee tablet beside him. "Break my furniture, and I add it to your debt." I released the table. He smiled. "Good disciple," I answered. "Magnus should heal." Roderick's smile disappeared. The fine stayed open. Magnus's oath blocked his direct route, but it did not make him reasonable. 3 days later, outside the pill exchange, Marlowe Gravesend found me. She was the senior who had slapped Brogan and steered me toward my sacrifice. She had hated me on every previous meeting. That afternoon, she touched my chest and smiled like we shared a secret. "Kieran," Marlowe murmured, "you've clearly been avoiding me." I removed her hand. "We've only spoken twice. One time your bird tried to kill me." She stepped closer. "You caught my wrist once," I replied. "I stopped you hitting Brogan." Marlowe leaned toward my ear. "Maybe I wanted you to catch it again." In my defense, she was beautiful enough to make the line dangerous. Her personality made it impossible. I stepped away. Marlowe let herself fall against a wall and cried out. 2 passing disciples turned. She held her wrist like I had injured her. "You pushed me," she accused. I pointed at the untouched sleeve. "You used to slap my relative for breathing near you. Now you're suddenly performing injuries for my attention. This is a trap." Her smile shook. Fear cracked through the performance. Then, she swallowed a pink pill. Heat rushed across her face. Her pupils widened. Whatever Magnus's agent had supplied turned the performance into a desperate chase. Marlowe grabbed for my robe. I used blood step. She followed through 3 courtyards, knocked over a medicine cart, and ordered me to stop running. Every disciple nearby watched the proud simp magnet chase the broke man she used to mock. The public reaction spread faster than the love pill. I tried the men's bathhouse because I assumed she would stop at the door. She charged inside. Half-dressed disciples scattered into the pools. One threw a towel at my head. Another demanded a murder fine for emotional damage. I wrapped the towel around my shoulders and escaped through the rear window. Marlowe climbed after me. "You can't run forever," she called. "I only need to run until your personality returns." The nearest safe building was the Grand Archive, where Blackveil stored dangerous techniques behind stronger wards. I crossed the entrance, slammed the inner door, and triggered the privacy seal. Marlowe struck the barrier from outside. The door locked behind me. Outside, Marlowe hit the seal again, and every silver symbol flashed red. Inside, the room smelled of cold, sharp incense. A silver bell chimed once. Seraphine Ashcroft sat beyond the folding screen, holding one cracked silver bell. I stood there damp, wrapped in a bathhouse towel with a love-drugged senior pounding behind me. Seraphine was already inside, watching me. The Grand Archive privacy seal held Marlowe outside. Inside, Seraphine Ashcroft watched me drip bathwater onto a floor worth more than my residence. The future saintess sat beside a low table. Her black outer robe hung over the screen behind her, and a silver underrobe covered everything important. One cracked bell rested in her palm. I still wore the bathhouse towel around my shoulders. "Sorry," I told her. "I was fleeing a sudden romantic emergency." Marlowe hit the outer seal again. Seraphine's eyes moved toward the door. "That woman is under a desire spell." That named the attack. I learned the setup later. 2 disciples who heard Magnus's order said he first wanted my Blackwood relatives slaughtered. One subordinate reminded him they had treated me like trash, so Magnus switched targets. Brogan witnessed the rest. A Magnus agent scattered Marlowe's admirers, pinned her to a pillar, and gave her half a month to seduce me or die. Brogan tried to step between them. The agent's pressure forced him to his knees before he reached her. I replied, "The personality changed." Seraphine raised 2 fingers. Silver light crossed the room and sealed every gap around the door. Marlowe's pounding became distant. The heat from her spell had followed me inside as a faint pink mist. Seraphine closed one hand, and the mist collapsed into sparks. Outside, Marlowe called my name and struck the ward again. Seraphine did not glance away from me. The frost marrow flame had changed how her pressure reached my body. Before the mission, one look from her could lock my knees. Now pale cold gathered around my ribs and pushed back. Seraphine increased the pressure. The floor cracked beneath my boots, but I stayed upright. Her bell stopped moving. That tiny pause felt better than applause. Seraphine looked back. Seraphine said, "You resisted it." I answered, "Dangerous women keep making very unreasonable requests." One bell chimed. I corrected myself. The spell felt wrong. Seraphine stood and walked closer. Frostmarrow reacted inside my chest. Pale fire spread under my skin, resisting the pressure she normally used to pin me flat. That caught her attention. She touched 2 fingers to my wrist. Cold spiritual energy moved through my channels and met the flame. My body held. Months earlier, her aura had put my face on the floor. Now I remained standing. Seraphine pointed at the towel. "Remove that." I held it tighter. "This is currently my most formal clothing." She pointed toward a folded robe on a bench. I changed behind the screen and returned properly dressed. Look, confidence has limits. Mine ended before arguing with Seraphine while wrapped in public bath linen. When I stepped out, she was holding the 6 Desires Codex. The same forbidden book had started half my problems and upgraded the other half. Seraphine opened it to the moving symbols. "Perform the 6 Desires secret technique," she ordered. I stared at the page. "I don't actually know that technique." The room cooled. Seraphine's voice stayed quiet. "You used it in my court," I answered. "The codex art was recorded under another name. I kept the Auto-Cultivation System out of the answer." Seraphine's fingers pressed harder. The codex symbols moved, but my channels did not answer to the name she used. Her grip eased slightly, and the cold pressure around my chest weakened with it. Seraphine asked, "What name?" I answered, "Nameless art." She stepped into my space and placed one palm over my chest. Her spiritual energy entered slowly, searching for the circulation pattern. I kept my hands visible. "The earlier sessions happened while my body was out of my control," I told her. "My memory cuts off before the technique starts." Seraphine asked, "You remember nothing?" I answered. "I remember waking stronger, exhausted, and usually missing half a month." "Very efficient. Terrible review." Her thumb moved once against my robe. The contact sent a familiar current through both of us. Then she kissed me. The silver bells rang without her lifting a hand. Warm energy answered from the nameless art inside my channels. The pattern was unmistakable. The technique copied from the codex and the art Seraphine named were the same thing. I broke the kiss first. The nameless art is 6 desires. Seraphine's eyes sharpened. Now you recognize it, I replied. The energy is familiar, my memory is still empty. She watched my face for a lie. None came. The energy, missing time, and new strength were real. Only the technique's true name had stayed completely hidden until that moment. She placed the codex aside, then perform it consciously. This time, no prompt appeared. No hosting seized my arms. Seraphine waited while I still controlled my own body. I looked at the sealed door, the codex, and the woman who could erase me with one hand. I choose when we continue, I said. Seraphine's expression barely changed. Choose! She still controlled the room and could overpower me. The next step belonged to me. I reached for her hand. Continue, Seraphine asked. No hosting? None. No excuses afterward? I answered her. Complaining is my right. That remains non-negotiable. One silver bell chimed. Her mouth stayed flat. The pressure around my wrist still eased enough for me to notice. Seraphine watched my hand close around hers. You're clearly afraid, she observed. Obviously, Seraphine added. You still agreed. For 18 years I let fear choose every move. I can make one terrible decision personally. Her fingers tightened. That's really your reason? My reasons are private. Seraphine leaned close enough for the bells at her wrist to touch my sleeve. Then keep them! The current waited at the edge of my channels. Stepping back was still possible. Releasing her hand was still possible. I chose neither. The 6 desires pattern opened through our joined palms. Light crossed the floor and linked our breathing. That was the last moment I remembered clearly. The rest remained behind the archive's privacy ward. I chose the start. Then half a month disappeared. One fragment survived from the end. I woke on the platform at body tempering layer 6, too exhausted to stand. A thin crack in Seraphine's bell had repaired itself. Seraphine checked the result twice before speaking. Spiritual pressure rolled from her sleeves in slow waves. The repaired bell rang once, clear and steady again. She looked from the bell to me before giving the result aloud. Seraphine studied the bell. The first result didn't fully return. Then she adjusted one sleeve. You may leave, I asked. After half a month, that's really the farewell? Seraphine asked. You wanted a speech? I replied. Water and continued ownership of my memories, please. Her fingers touched my forehead. I recognized the gesture too late. Seraphine, that's still deeply unfair. Silver light filled my vision. The fragment ended. The next clear moment found me on the Grand Archive floor with a painful waist and a fully tied robe. I strongly suspected someone had used me as an advanced cultivation accessory again. I checked my hands first. No bindings, no fresh wounds. The frost marrow flame burned steadily, and layer 6 energy filled every channel. A fading silver seal remained on my forehead. Seraphine had removed almost the entire half month and left the power, exhaustion, and bill. A yaksha-shaped guardian blocked the exit with one stone palm and a sales tablet. Blackveil had made even a supernatural gatekeeper work retail. No one leaves the Grand Archive without buying one technique, it announced. I looked back. Empty. Was that rule active when I entered? You used a private seal. That sounds like her fee. The tablet showed one useful option, a feigned death art that slowed my pulse and locked my muscles. It could fool an enemy for a few breaths. The price was 800 spirit stones. I paid before the Guardian found a more expensive way to say no. The tablet pressed the pattern into my mind, and the Auto-Cultivation System recorded it immediately. Archive robbery, useful receipt. The Guardian checked a bronze calendar wheel. How long was I inside? Half a month. That number hurt more than the price. My 3-month window kept shrinking while Seraphine kept my memory and I carried the result. I looked at my robe. Did anything unusual happen? One man entered in a bathhouse towel and left fully dressed. I asked. That's really your report? The Guardian answered. It was memorable. The Guardian opened the door. Marlowe was gone. Her spell had burned out long before I woke. The courtyard had returned to normal while half my debt window disappeared without permission. I went straight back to alchemy. For the next half-month, I refined pills until the furnace room smelled permanently medicinal. The system kept every batch top grade, and frost marrow kept the furnace heat from running away. I stored each batch in sealed bottles. 12 pills became 24, then 60, then 120. The number finally looked large enough to threaten the fine. I consumed enough medicine to push the new layer toward its peak. By the end of that half-month, layer 6 had almost no room left. Half a month with Seraphine and another half-month at the furnace had consumed a full month. The debt clock had kept moving while my memory did not. I carried 10 sealed bottles to Roderick's courtyard. My bandaged guarantor was sitting beneath a damaged roof, reading 3 compensation demands. Magnus had left one eye bruised and half the furniture broken. Vespera had apparently improved his week by comparison. Roderick saw the bottles and covered the papers. What to do damage now? He asked. I placed the first bottle on his table. Your opinion of me. He opened it. 12 top-grade bone-tempering pills rolled against the jade. By the 5th bottle, Roderick had stopped testing quality and locked the courtyard ward. By the 10th, 120 flawless pills covered the black appraisal cloth. His bandaged hands became careful. "Kieran," he said, finally using my name. "Who else saw these?" "No one who knows the source." Roderick sealed the merest bottle. "Can you repeat this? Energy sets the limit." He checked his bandages and guarantee tablet, then stopped mentioning my funeral. Roderick swept the bottles into his storage ring. His voice dropped. "This volume can't enter the ordinary exchange. They'll trace the source within a day." I sat opposite him. "Then find buyers who pay enough to forget my face." Roderick tapped one bottle. "A lawless offshore market handles rare top-grade pills without polite questions." I asked, "Can the sale cover 74,800? Roderick replied, "It can threaten the number." I frowned. That answer still dodged yes. Roderick shrugged. "Your accounting had earned a much uglier answer." I tapped his guarantee tablet. "Your accounting still promised to pay." Roderick ignored that and examined my aura. His expression changed again. Roderick stared. "Layer 6, I answered. "Seraphine teaches aggressively." He checked again. "Peak layer 6. Roderick stood. He checked my cultivation twice, then looked toward Seraphine's residence. He had spent years climbing through the same realm. I had crossed another layer while losing track of my own calendar. His mouth tightened at the layer. Then his eyes returned to the bottles. "Don't even attempt the next breakthrough without proper medicine," he ordered. I pointed at the bottles. "Find a buyer, then lecture me." Roderick kept the stock and opened a breakthrough pill recipe. I left before his planning became another mission tied to my fine. That night, back inside my courtyard, I opened the iron frame art and prepared to break through again. Layer 7 would finish the body transformation I had spent 18 years pretending I could never reach. I started one-click hosting. The system circulated energy once. Then, it found the missing resource. Required resource missing. 1 jade marrow pill. I still didn't own one. The system answered with its favorite threat. Nearest qualifying resource located. Free gift available. The auto-cultivation system took control before I could ask who owned the jade marrow pill. My body left the courtyard, crossed 2 peaks with Bloodstep, and entered Celestia Morn's private alchemy grounds. Of course, the nearest qualifying pill belonged to the Pill Princess. Celestia was the talented alchemist who had tried to buy my first top-grade batch. She still believed Roderick hid the real Grandmaster. Now my system was about to rob her personally. Tamsin Westmere, Celestia's senior, told me the first part later. That morning, Celestia had finished the Jade Marrow pill and shown it to her older sister like a trophy. Celestia had wanted the Frost Marrow flame for this breakthrough. Roderick gave that flame to my mission instead, so she chose the 9-fold Frost Spring as her next path. Hosting reached a sealed tempering chamber beneath her residence. 3 wards blocked the door. My body used Frost Marrow to freeze the first, Bloodstep to cross the second, and the Grudge Saver to split the third. I tried to cancel. The system ignored me. Then the chamber wards lit behind me, and every alchemy bell on Celestia's peak started ringing. So much for stealth. The system had found the resource. It had also announced my visit to anyone who understood broken wards. Inside, a pale spring filled the stone chamber. Cold mist covered the water. Celestia sat at the center in a fitted training wrap, circulating energy through a dark blue current. Her folded robe rested beside the spring. An open medicine case sat on top of it. The first slot held a soul-calming pill. Its seal read, Frost Spring Backlash. Deep sleep 1 month. The second slot held the jade bottle my system wanted. My controlled hand crossed the room and opened the case. Celestia opened her eyes. "Kieran?" My hand found the second bottle. Her surprise vanished. "Put that down." Hosting opened it. 1 jade marrow pill rolled into my palm. Celestia left the spring in one motion and struck my shoulder. Her palm carried enough force to split stone. Frost Marrow rose automatically and blocked half the impact. The other half drove me against the wall. Hosting swallowed the pill before my feet touched the floor. Required resource acquired. Celestia stared at the empty bottle. Then my body jumped into the spring. Look, the pill theft was already fatal social behavior. Entering her private tempering spring upgraded it to a personal war. The system pulled the dark blue water into my channels. Celestia's face changed. "That's the 9-fold Frost Spring," she snapped. "Stop absorbing it." Hosting released the Frost Marrow flame. Pale fire spread across the spring. The rare water and the flame collided around my body, then poured into the iron frame circulation. Celestia twisted one hand free and slapped a control seal beneath the water. 9 blue chains rose from the spring and wrapped around my waist. For one breath, they held. Then Frost Marrow spread along each chain. The first froze. The second cracked. All 9 broke before Celestia could complete another seal. Her expression changed from fury to disbelief. She had built the chamber to control that spring. My system was using the flame she had wanted to defeat her own safeguards. Celestia attacked again. She drove a palm into my back and tried to force me from the water. The spring reacted against her unfinished tempering cycle. Blood reached the corner of her mouth. She still attacked a third time. Good. She was furious, injured, and fighting for her property. The system treated all 3 facts as customer complaints. Hosting caught her wrist. Celestia twisted free and sent a blade of spiritual light toward my throat. My body lowered under it, caught her other arm, and locked both wrists behind her without striking back. She kicked the side of my knee. Jade medicine had already reached my bones. The joint held. Celestia stared at the leg she expected to break. The frost spring dropped by another foot. Celestia hissed. "You stole my pill," I answered. "I know," my mouth answered because hosting did not need it. The apology sounded worse. Celestia pulled. "You're still draining my spring," admitted. "I know too," she snapped. "Release me," answered. "I can't." Celestia drove her forehead into my jaw. Pain flashed through my skull. Hosting tightened the hold and kept absorbing. Celestia planted both feet against the basin and pulled hard enough to crack the stone beneath her heels. The backlash shook her arms, but she kept wrenching against the hold. She fought to protect the breakthrough my system was stealing. Her strength finally failed only after the spring backlash weakened her legs. Then, the last dark blue current drained away from the stone basin. The system released her only when the cultivation reached completion. Energy struck every bone in my body. The chamber floor cracked beneath the spring. A clear ringing passed through my arms, ribs, and spine. Impurities burned out through frost marrow, while the jade marrow pill rebuilt the structure underneath. The jade marrow medicine reached every fracture the iron frame art had left behind. Frost spring pressure filled the gaps, and frost marrow sealed them. A clear pulse traveled through my skeleton until the final barrier broke at last. Weak points disappeared one by one. My cultivation broke into body tempering layer 7. Then, the system gave the larger result. Iron frame transformation complete. Jade bones formed. Quality, top grade. I flexed one hand. The movement sounded different. My knuckles carried a faint clear ring, and the stone rim beneath my palm split without effort. I rolled one shoulder. The old shoulder ache was finally gone. Frost marrow moved through the new bone structure and left my channels intact. Then blood step pressure settled cleanly into my legs, and every joint stayed still. Iron frame could endure more. Blood step could push harder. Frost marrow could circulate without shredding my channels. The system finally felt genuinely overpowered. Every bone agreed with that verdict. For 18 years, I had survived by scoring 1 point and hiding signs of talent. Now the household's useless son stood at layer 7 with jade bones. Hosting ended. Celestia collapsed beside the empty spring. I caught her before she struck the stone. Her training wrap was soaked. Her breathing stayed shallow but steady. The spring backlash had damaged her channels, and my system had taken the medicine meant to protect them. That part belonged to me after control returned. The labeled soul-calming pill was already beside the empty jade bottle. The system had taken her protection and left her injured. I grabbed the pill before the backlash damaged her channels any further. Its 1-month warning was the bill. The alternative was letting the damage worsen. I gave her the pill. Warm light crossed her face. Her breathing steadied. The tension left her hands, and she fell fully asleep. I moved her onto the dry platform and covered her with the outer robe the system had searched. Someone knocked on the sealed chamber door. Tamsin called through the sealed door. "Celestia, you accepted the Hollowstone assignment. We leave now." I froze. The wards I had broken were already repairing. Escaping through them would make enough noise to announce guilt across the peak. Tamsin knocked again. I opened the door halfway. Tamsin Westmere stood outside. She was the senior who had offered Celestia the Hollowstone mission that morning. Fitted armor covered her shoulders, and body-tempering layer 8 pressure filled the corridor. Her gaze moved past me. She saw the empty spring, Celestia asleep on the platform, and my damp robe. Tamsin entered before I could close the gap. She touched the empty spring, checked the broken control seal, and knelt beside Celestia. Her fingers found the stable pulse. Relief appeared first. Then she saw the empty jade bottle beside my knee. Relief vanished, and her hand went to her weapon. I used the first lie available. "Celestia and I, we're lovers." Silence. Tamsin looked again. Her eyes narrowed. "You're really Kieran Blackwood?" I nodded. "Correct." Tamsin called me Celestia's rejected pill seller. I answered. It developed aggressively, romantically. Tamsin stepped closer. "Move." I blocked the doorway. "She's still resting." Tamsin pointed inside. "After breaking 3 wards?" I replied. "Privacy's very complicated at Blackveil." Tamsin's eyes moved from my face to Celestia's covered body. "You expect me to believe she invited you through 3 broken wards?" "I expect you to stop trying to watch a private meeting," I told her. "Your curiosity is becoming suspicious." Color rose across her cheeks. The weapon cleared its sheath, but stayed away from Celestia. The corridor pressure doubled instantly. Before I could answer, Tamsin attacked first using her free hand. The first palm angled away from Celestia's doorway and straight toward my chest without warning. Her palm crossed the doorway faster than I could track. I used blood step and appeared beside her shoulder. She turned with me. Layer 8 gave her more raw energy. Jade bones gave me a body that could survive using speed against it. Tamsin caught my sleeve and tried to throw me into the corridor wall. I planted one foot. The stone cracked. My leg did not move. Her grip tightened. I released frost marrow through the sleeve. Cold locked around her fingers. Tamsin let go before the flame reached her wrist. I crossed behind her, caught both arms, and pinned them against her back. She drove an elbow toward my ribs. Jade bones absorbed the strike. I tightened the hold until she stopped testing it. Tamsin stared at the cracked floor beneath my foot. Tamsin said, "Layer 7. I answered, "You attacked first," she added. "You subdued someone above you." I replied, "I protected my supposed relationship." Tamsin tried one final turn. Bloodstep shifted my stance before she found leverage. Her resistance stopped. Tamsin stared at the cracked floor, then at my unmoved leg. Her weapon slid back into its sheath. "Release me," she ordered. I released her and stepped away. Tamsin checked Celestia's breathing herself. The soul-calming pill's warm light remained visible beneath her skin. "What happened?" she demanded. "I gave her the safest version. Her tempering went wrong." I stabilized her. "She'll sleep for 1 full month." Tamsin looked at the empty spring. "Most of the ninefold frost spring is gone." I kept my face steady. Tamsin pointed at Celestia. "Can she travel?" "No," I said. Tamsin replied. "Celestia accepted because the reward includes a rare pill formula and crimson beard vine. Hollowstone still requires 2 people. I refused again." Tamsin folded her arms. "You claim to be her lover. You witnessed the condition preventing her from attending. Replace her. Blackmail. Departure set for sunset." Refusing would reopen every question about the spring, the pill, and why Celestia could not answer for herself. The lie dodged one fight and drafted me straight into that manor mission. "I'll replace her myself," I said. Tamsin nodded once. "Bring a protector if you've got one." I went straight to Roderick's courtyard. My unwilling sponsor was absent. A wooden puppet sat behind his desk. One arm hung loose, and old blade marks covered its chest. I asked where Roderick was. The puppet spoke. "Master is away." I asked his return time. It repeated, "Master is away. Requested help." It repeated, "Master is away." I leaned closer. "Anything else?" It repeated, "Master is away." I searched the desk anyway. Roderick had left no map, message, or emergency talisman. The puppet watched. It repeated, "Master is away." I said, "I heard you." Repeated, "Master is away." My patience had survived stepmothers, ghosts, a spider, and Magnus. The puppet became its least impressive challenger. It won by being more annoying than every enemy before it combined. The puppet had the system's listening skills and none of its rewards. I punched it. Its head spun around once and faced me again. The puppet repeated, "Master is away." I hit it with the flat of the grudge saber. The puppet crossed the courtyard, struck a pillar, and repeated the sentence from the ground. "No protector. Roderick absent. No convenient escape." By sunset, Tamsin met me at the outer gate and led the way toward Hollowstone Manor. She glanced at the grudge saber, then at me. Tamsin asked, "How long with Celestia?" I answered, "Long enough for danger." Tamsin's mouth curved. "She's never mentioned you." I replied, "She values privacy." She added, "She recruited you after one pill sale." I told her, "Our romance has very strong commercial foundations." Tamsin almost laughed. Then the path narrowed and her expression changed. I asked, "Why was this mission still open?" Tamsin's smile disappeared. "Several teams have already entered Hollowstone Manor. Only one person came back."